Tayo Mokong, walang Delta.
Majority Leader.
Nakahanap sila rin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we take up our efforts of business, I would just ask if Senator Joel Villanueva is present on the floor
He's
to
here.
take up his.
He's here. Senator Joel
Okay,
and Senator Gatchalian are here.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. If I may ask for permission of the body, we'll just move to approve bicameral conference committee report. Mr. President, we are in receipt of the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1520 and House Bill number 6756. This is the Doktor para sa Bayan Act, which the Senate President is the principal author of this measure. I move that we consider the said bicameral committee report, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the report is considered.
And Mr. President, may we recognize the chairman of the Senate panel, our distinguished gentleman from Bulacan, Senator Joel Villanueva, for his sponsorship of the bicameral conference committee report.
Gentleman from Bulacan, Senator Joel Villanueva, Chairman of the Committee on Higher Education, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, on behalf of the Senate panel to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1520 and House Bill number 6756, or an act establishing a medical scholarship and return service program for deserving students and appropriating funds therefore. I have the honor to report to this August chamber the Bicameral Committee report on the reconciled bill. This report has been the result of hard work and dedication of all the members of the panel from both houses of Congress. On our part, we have Senators Nancy Binay, Sani Angara, Win Gatchalian, Risa Ontiveros, and yours truly. And for the part of the House of Representatives, Congressman Mark Go, Helen Tan, Rufus Rodriguez, Ann Hofer, Gabriel Bordado, and Brother Eddie Villanueva, as well as the valuable support and assistance from our resource persons and technical staff. At the outset, please allow me, Mr. President, to express our sincere appreciation to our counterparts in the House for accepting most of the Senate's proposals. Mr. President, instead of reading the joint explanation of the bicameral report consisting of 14 pages, please allow me to just present the highlights of the reconciled bill as endorsed by the Bicameral Conference Committee, and the joint explanation be inserted and considered read into the record of today's plenary. First, the bill establishes the Medical Scholarship and Return Service Program for deserving Filipino students with priority for qualified applicants from municipalities without government physicians to ensure or to achieve the goal of assigning at least one doctor for every municipality in the country. Second, the bill provides free tuition and other school fees, including allowances and fees for internship, medical board review, and licensure examination. Third, the bill sets conditions on scholarship grant, such as the requirements for scholars to finish the entire Doctor of Medicine program within the prescribed time frame, and to render a return of service equivalent to the number of years he or she has availed of the scholarship. Fourth, the bill imposes sanctions on doctors who will refuse to comply with the mandatory return service, including the payment of the cost of scholarship expenses. Fifth, the bill consolidates and harmonizes all nationally funded medical scholarship programs under the Medical Scholarship and Return Service Program. Sixth, the bill requires CHED to streamline the requirements for the application for authority to offer Doctor of Medicine program and strengthens the partnership between SUCs and DOH hospitals to increase the number of medical schools throughout the country, with one region having at least one state-operated medical school in 5 years. Seventh, the bill lays down the key roles of the CHED, DOH, SUCs, and the partner private higher education institutions, as well as the local government units in line with the implementation of this measure. Lastly, Mr. President, the bill includes a transitory provision that all scholars under the existing medical scholarship programs of DOH and CHED shall automatically be eligible to avail the benefits under this measure. With the aforesaid, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move for the adoption of the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1520 and House Bill number 6756 for the Doktor para sa Bayan Act. Thank you very much, and may God bless us all.
Thank you, Senator Villanueva. What does the majority leader say?
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move to adopt and ratify the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1520 and House Bill number 6756, and consider the report, Mr. President, of the Senate panel be inserted to the records of the Senate. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none. The Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 1520 and House Bill 6756, Doktor para sa Bayan Act, is hereby ratified.
We'd like to congratulate
Senator Villanueva.
Thank you,
We'd like
Mr.
to also
President.
congratulate the Senate President as the principal author, and Senator Ralph Recto as one of the principal authors as well, and of course our sponsor, the very hardworking Senator Joy Villanueva, who's probably approved the most second reading measures this last quarter, Mr. President. So we congratulate him as well. And
It is very rare. It is very rare that a Congress approves Senate Bill number 1.
Mr. President,
congratulations, sir.
Villanueva.
Yeah,
Yeah,
congratulations.
Mr. President.
I seek the floor, Mr. President.
Senator Villanueva.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, this is the day that the Lord has made, as mentioned in Psalms 118, verse 24. It also says in the good book, Mr. President, that we give honor to whom honor is due. So please, Mr. President, allow me to express my sincerest thanks to our leader of the Senate President, not only because he is the one who filed Senate Bill number 1, this medical scholarship and with return service program, but also for trusting this representation to lead the committee. I also would like to thank our co-authors and the sponsors. We have Senate President Pro Tempore, Senate President Pro Tempore Ralph Recto, of course, our hardworking Majority Floor Leader, Mig Subiri, our distinguished colleagues from the seatmates block, Senator Sani Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Gatchalian, of course, Senator Gordon, Senator Grace Po, Senator Cayetano, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Lapid, Senator Pacquiao, Senator Lacson, Senator Tolentino, Senator Revilla, of course, Senator Bongo, who is the chairperson of the Committee on Health. Let me also thank our very good minority floor leader for helping us craft this measure, ensuring that this would be relevant and practical and applicable. Senator Francis Pangilinan and Senator Risa Ontiveros. Mr. President, the coronavirus pandemic has only exposed and exacerbated the Achilles heel of our healthcare system, the shrinking supply of Filipino medical doctors. Imagine, we only have 3 doctors per 10,000 population, far from the ideal ratio of 10 doctors per 10,000 population. Tila hindi rin po ito nalalayo at mas mababa pa nga kung tutuusin sa bilang ng mga critical na COVID patients, 76% po na hindi na nakakarating sa ating mga ospital o pagamutan. Let me reiterate that the beneficiaries of the free medical education are required to render a return service fitting and proper to the Filipino people from medical doctors who are educated from the taxpayers' money. Hindi pa po tayo tagumpay sa COVID-19, Ginoong Pangulo, pero dahil sa ratifikasyon po ngayon ng BICAM report ng Doktor para sa Bayan Bill at hari nawa ang agarang pagpirma nito ng ating Pangulo, binibigyan po natin ng mas malaking tsansa ang susunod na henerasyon ng mga Pilipino na manalo laban sa mga sakit o anumang uri ng pandemya. As we lead into the plenary deliberations on the 2021 budget, Mr. President, when we resume next month, We also hope to garner your support, my esteemed colleagues, in allotting funds for the Doktor para sa Bayan Bill. We hope that this landmark measure is immediately enrolled in Malacanang for the President's signature. Again, my sincerest thanks to you, Mr. President, and my distinguished colleagues. Maraming salamat po at muli pagpalain tayo ng ating Panginoong Diyos.
Thank you. Thank you. And once again, thank you, Senator Villanueva.
Senator Angara, Mr. President, Senator Angara would like to be
Senator
recognized.
Sally Engralas, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues. I just want to congratulate, brief note to congratulate everybody, especially the Senate President for filing Senate Bill number 1. So it's historic. We found out from the Senate President, minsan-minsan lang po na-approve yung Senate Bill number 1. Of course, the co-author, Senator Ralph Recto, and the members of the BICAM panel, but most especially our colleague who did all the heavy lifting. And it would have been so easy, madali lang po sana talagang ma-depress po ang ating kasamahan sapagkat kakaiba po yung nangyari sa kanya itong nakaraang mga buwan, no? To lose a beloved sibling and co-worker in public service, I can only imagine, as well as his beloved mother. Very difficult. My father died 2 years ago and I was really in a deep depression after that. So, but I have seen how our colleague has taken another road and really devoted himself to his work with passion, with compassion, with dedication, and with energy. And for that, I salute him and his staff for all the good work they have done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Majority, Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized.
Mr. President, I would also like to commend the sponsor of this measure. I think it is timely and it is God-given that he was directed to be at the forefront of this measure, because in as much as nothing we do can take away the pain of the loss of a loved one, but these kind of actions in the long run give us not just that sense of self-fulfillment in doing our job, but also in remembering and immortalizing the people we loved who also worked in the service of this country and the Lord. So on that note, His Honor has my highest esteemed appreciation for the work he's done. I'm so proud of this bill myself, and I want to put on record that I will continue to work with him and our presiding officer, the Senate President, on this measure. It is the first step in the right direction, but it will require many, many more steps. So I hope we can continue to work together on this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Sounds good. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I believe we have a very short reference of business. Maybe proceed with the
Yes.
reference of business, Mr. President, and then
Second
for
additional
the Q&A.
reference of business. The Secretary will proceed.
Second additional reference of business, resolutions, PS Resolution Number 547, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the plummeting prices of palay and a systematic review of the uneven implementation of the Rice Tarification Law, RTL, with the end in view of determining the appropriate policy interventions in order to protect farmers' incomes and livelihoods in anticipation of the upcoming harvest season amid the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, introduced by Senator De Lima.
Referred to the Committee on Agriculture.
PS Resolution Number 548, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the increasing number of killings of farmer leaders and political activists in relation to the national government's anti-insurgency campaign, which have intensified in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, introduced by Senator De Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Justice, National Defense. That's it, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move.
Majority Leader, if I may.
Yes, Senator Recto, Mr. President would like to be recognized.
Yes, just a manifestation with the permission of the Senate President.
Senator Recto is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May I manifest to submit my explanation of vote for SB 1844? We will just submit it to the records, Mr. President.
All right, we will place that on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, Mr. President, if the sponsor is ready for the great measure, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1357. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of 1357 is in order.
May we recognize the distinguished sponsor, Senator Pia S. Cayetano, and to continue his amendments, our distinguished colleague from Batangas, Senator Ralph G. Recto.
Yeah, we were on
thank-
page 7. We were on
Yes.
page 7 yesterday.
Yes, Mr. President, page 7.
I've no amendments on page 7. I think I read into the records yesterday that, just for the record, Mr. President, assuming we were to approve the MCIT, that was a compromise, an amendment to the amendment which I accepted from Senator Dillon, the minority leader, then necessarily on page 7, lines 10 to 12, section 7, we would have to delete the provision, replace the same with the following, provided that effective July 1, or the same amendment that we propose with the amendment of Senator Dillon for resident foreign corporations, Mr. President. That would be in page 7.
Yes, we note that, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
All right, therefore, the
I
sponsor,
have no more amendments on page 7.
no further amendments on page 7. We go to page 8. Amendments on page 8.
No, wait, Mr. President. So what is the decision on the amendments proposed by the gentleman from Batangas? Is it accepted?
No,
Sorry?
Mr. President, we parked it because I was asking for the data from DOF on the foregone revenue of 1% of MCIT. Senator Ralph, after session, we discussed and he had the figure, but DOF said that's not their figure. So I said, well, show me the figure so I can again present it to the body, Mr. President. So until then, let's park it, please, because I'd like to present the figures to
So,
the body. Thank you.
okay, just for the record, so it will come back to, we will take it up
Yes.
again later.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you
Thank
for
you
that
very much.
clarification.
All right, thank you. So we go to page 8. Any amendments on page 8? No amendments on page 8. Page 9? No amendments on page 9. We go
Yes.
to page 10, then page
On page 8, assuming we were to adopt the progressive corporate income tax, that should be found on CIT rate for non-resident foreign corporation, and that should be placed on page 8, line 25 to 44.
This will
Yes.
be affected, you mean?
Yes, noted,
Yes,
Mr.
that's
President.
right.
Right.
I have a note on that, so we will not forget
Noted.
that. Any amendments
Yes.
we made in the former, we will apply. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. President,
Applied.
Mr. President.
Yeah.
Tama, hindi siya progressive.
Yes, Senator Ping Lacson.
Yes, Mr. President, just so we can follow, we're on page 9 or page 10. How many amendments or proposed amendments have so far been accepted and rejected by the sponsor? Just for our information, Mr. President.
Mr. President, maybe the Secretariat can confirm, but from my record, 3 have been accepted.
And none
3.
so far rejected.
The rest have been tabled.
Okay,
More-
thank you very much, Mr. President.
To-
Thank you for the information.
According to the Secretariat, that's their count.
Yes.
Only 3 were accepted, all the rest were tabled.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the information.
Yes. Roughly 8 are tabled, Mr. President.
All right. So page 9, there is none on page 8 because it is tabled. Page 9, no amendments on page 9, we go to page 10.
Yes, Mr. President, on page 10.
Senator Correct.
Yes, thank you very much. May I know before I propose the amendment, may I know from the sponsor, what is the income tax rate? Or what is the tax rate on foreign source dividends?
Ito lang yun.
Mr. President, it's 30%.
Okay. There are, Mr. President, before I propose my amendment, let me explain that there are Filipino companies abroad who may want to bring back their dividends to the Philippines, but they cannot bring it back because the tax rate is at 30%. And most countries today in the world have taken out this tax rate on dividends coming from abroad, Mr. President. Having said that, on page 10, line 4, insert a new section to read as follows. May I put this on the board, on the screen, Mr. President? So that Filipino companies and individuals that have dividends abroad, because the purpose of this bill is to attract investment, and this is Filipino money abroad, so that they can bring back their resources tax-free for reinvestment in the Philippines, Mr. President. My understanding is that this is acceptable to the Department of Finance. Madam Sponsor, would this be acceptable? Yes.
Mr. President, I am aware of this provision. I think even the majority floor leader, this has been brought to my attention numerous times. And personally, I understand, I don't know if His Honor has explained it, so let me explain it for the record for our colleagues, that the purpose really here is that this is dividends received by our Filipinos or Filipino companies from investments abroad. So that those funds are abroad. When they bring it in here, they're taxed. And what they're asking for is, so that we can bring it here, huwag niyo naman kaming i-tax or taxes at a lower rate. Something like that. Is that correct, Mr. President?
That is correct. And, they've also paid dividends abroad, dividend tax abroad and income tax abroad. Yes.
So, Mr. President, may I ask His Honor, so the proposal here is what rate now, under His Honor's proposal?
No rate, zero rate, Mr. President.
Zero rate, okay.
Yes.
I can honestly say that I have not received from DOF a firm position, because what I know from the start, when it was first brought to my attention more than a year ago, this is a provision for PIFITA, no? But as all of you know, well, we are amending the NIRC, so there's no prohibition per se to put it here. I'm just spreading it into the records that this is one of those provisions that was intended to be tackled under PIFITA.
Yes.
Does His Honor feel strongly about including it here?
I think so, because it is part of the issue of attracting investments abroad.
And is His Honor open to a lower rate, or is there a strong push for zero? I mean, you know me, it's my job, no?
I think, yes,
to
yes.
get some revenues for government.
My understanding is that this is okay with the Department of Finance.
They're shaking their head, Your Honor. They're shaking their head right now.
Is it up and down or left to right?
Well, no,
Mr. President?
I would have said nodding. I would have said nodding if it's up and down.
Mr. President? Yeah.
Yes.
May I weigh in also on the, thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of Senator Recto and Senator Pia, I also had discussions with several multinational, well, Filipino companies that are based abroad. And their feeling is, we've earned this money, it's parked abroad, and we're not going to bring it in if they're going to tax us for it. So it's going to remain abroad. This money cannot be infused for future projects or future programs or its expansion in the Philippines. Sayang din naman. No, sayang naman po yan. It's a waste. So there's no earnings whatsoever from government on these funds if it is parked abroad. Except that if they bring it in, then definitely there's a benefit to the Philippines if they bring that money back into the Philippines. And so I'm with the Senate President Pro Temp on this, Mr. President. I think it's honest to say, that I think this will be beneficial to the country. It'll benefit the country and for future expansion of these businesses here within our shores. Rather than keeping it outside, what is the benefit to us if they keep their money outside, Mr. President? So I think it's something that we can tackle. I feel very supportive on this particular issue. with the Senate President Recto.
Yes. Thank you for that, Majority Floor Leader. I actually just wanted you to spread it on the record because I feel the same way about that need and the desire to make it more easier for the funds to come in. But from a procedural aspect, let me just point out what DOF was pointed out to me now, no? Because they paid a tax abroad, as the Senate President Pro Temp has already mentioned, and we have a principle of no double taxation.
Yes,
They get a
yes.
tax credit. So that is how they prefer that it is handled. So basically, ang net effect would be zero tax also. I'd like my colleagues to help me weigh in on this, because I agree. I have no disagreement whatsoever with the position of the Senate President Pro Temp and the Majority Floor Leader. None. But it's my job to explain the process. So does anyone have any thoughts on that? Because I want
Yes.
to be able for us to take note. Sorry, excuse me, gentlemen. Sorry, gentlemen on the floor. I'm distracted by the noise. Guys, sorry. Okay. Anyway, so I would really want to weigh in, no? Because obviously we have procedures for that reason. There's double taxation. I'm a little bit familiar with that. May I have the comments of the gentleman? I'd hate to park this again, but
Yeah,
bear
yeah.
with me because I'm trying to put on the floor all the legal issues, the procedural
Yes.
issues, so that we can move them forward. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, in fact, sometimes there is triple taxation. Number one, you pay the income tax, okay? Then you pay a dividend tax on the same income, okay? Then you bring it back home to the Philippines, you pay another tax. Okay? Now, having said that, what the BRA says is that the paperwork. What we're saying here, let's just make it zero so that there is no paperwork. Because if there's this paperwork, then there's room for corruption.
Mr. President, can I make a comment?
Yes, Senator Villar.
I agree with the other senators that there should not be any double taxation. And it will not benefit us if this money will not be brought to the Philippines by the Filipinos. Maybe we can approve this and maybe say subject to style if we're thinking of how to do it. So that we just have to find some ways by which we will make the changes, and it can be subject to style. Maybe our chairman will be able to study how to phrase it, this kind of amendment. Because we are agreeing in principle, it's
Yes.
just that she doesn't know how to say it. So maybe we can give her time to say it in a different way that is acceptable.
So
Yes.
it's coming from Her
proposal
Honor.
that yes.
I'm prepared to say accepted subject to style, as Her Honor
Yeah,
has
yeah.
recommended, because bear with me on my job to help DOF
Okay.
get but I also agree, the Senate President Pro Temp some observation, more paperwork. And I also agree with that. So in the interest of moving on, because we agree in principle, it's accepted subject to
Thank you.
style or procedure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Four na ako. Four nang
Four.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd also like to thank the lady senator. Thank you very much, ma'am.
All right.
No, I was
If
just
there is-
taking my moment to take a bow kasi pinalakpakan ako ng mga kasama ko dito.
Okay. If there's any consolation,
Dadalawa lang kayo. Ang dadalawa lang kayo, ang ingay nyo pa.
Actually, Mr. President,
if there's any consolation, Mr. President, there are only 4 more amendments on this particular issue on the income tax side. Then we can go to the rationalization of fiscal incentives. So that being approved, may I propose?
Procedurally, it has been accepted. It has not yet been approved by the plenary.
Yes. So it is sponsor?
yes, Mr.
Accepted.
Accepted subject to style. Yes.
All right, subject to style. Any objection? Adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next amendment,
Well, no more amendment on page 10 or still on page 10?
still on page 10, Mr. President.
Okay, go ahead.
The next amendment will be on page 10, line 16, or line 16, section 9, insert a paragraph to read as follows. May I present this in the screen, Mr. President?
Go ahead.
Wala na yung 50%. Oh. Okay. Okay. Let me explain this, Mr. President. We are saying that let us grant an additional 50% the deduction on salaries and wages and other forms of compensation for personal services actually rendered for a period of 3 years to save jobs. This is being done in most of the countries also in the region, almost all those affected by the pandemic, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. President, let me confirm to be sure I understand correctly. Mr. President, with your permission, I move so that I am not in constant close contact with the staff. If I don't have to talk to them, I will stay in the middle. Mr. Senate President Pro Temp, what you are proposing is that as an ordinary deduction, not for incentivized companies, no, to be clear, just for any company, you are
Yes.
proposing an additional 50% of wages and salaries, deduction equivalent to 50% more of
Only-
salaries and wages for a limited period.
Only for 3 years during this pandemic, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I am constrained to put this aside just because there are so many other provisions similar to this on deductions, but because this is pandemic related, in other words, this is something we probably would have taken up in Bayanihan. I will accept, subject to revisiting this if there is any provision that somehow addresses this concern and may be brought up later on. Because the reason I tend to shelve it is because there are many overlapping provisions and I have to be able to see it as a whole. I cannot get to the end and find out that by my accepting everything, I caused the government to lose 100 billion in revenues. I hope.
Nevertheless, may we hear the proposed amendment of the President Pro Tem for the sake of the stenographers?
Go ahead.
Yeah. On page 10, line 16, section 9, insert a paragraph to read as follows. Page 10, line 16.
Insert the paragraph to read as ito.
Hmm?
Go ahead.
It's a new paragraph. So on line 16, so in general, there shall be allowed as deduction from gross income all the ordinary necessary expenses paid or incurred during the taxable year in carrying on or which are directly attributable to the development, management, operation, and or conduct of the trade, business, or exercise of a profession, including a reasonable allowance for salaries, wages, and other forms of compensation for personal services actually rendered, including the grossed up monetary value of fringe benefits furnished or granted by the employer to the employee, provided that the final tax imposed under Section 33 hereof has been paid. Provided further that an additional amount equivalent to 50% of such salaries, wages, and other forms of compensation for personal services actually rendered shall be allowed as deductions effective January 1, 2021 until December 31, 2023.
All right.
Mr. President.
And then the response of the,
Question,
all right,
President?
for the response, the minority leader, Senator Lilo.
may we just know how much how much is the foregone revenues as a result of this, if it can be calculated?
Yes, that is actually what I was going to ask the Senate President Pro Temp if he has that.
I don't have it with me right now, but maybe we can ask the Department of Finance. Now, the truth of the matter is that today, many are losing their jobs. Many of the companies are firing employees, especially those that have a lot of labor. By allowing further deductions on labor costs, then there's a bigger or a reasonable chance that these companies will not fire their employees, and therefore government continues to collect revenue from these employees and the company, Mr. President.
Yes. Mr. President,
I think,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
President, it is best that we table this and allow the sponsor to consult the BIR and the Department of Finance, as this may have serious implications on our revenue stream. I do not know. I am just taking a conservative approach. That is why my suggestion is it is best that we table this first and task the sponsor to discuss this with the secretary, with the Department of Finance. That's my suggestion, Mr. President.
Thank you. The suggestion of the minority floor leader is well taken. I appreciate that. That is what I have done. I've tossed it out to them. So with the permission of the Senate President Pro Tem, may we shelve this to just get those numbers.
Sure, that's fine with me, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right.
Yes.
So,
On page- yes.
let's move on to page 11.
Still on page 10, Mr. President.
10 pa rin.
Yes, on 10, remove the provision on the limitation of deductible interest expense. On page 10, line 21, after the word income, delete the provisions up to line 4 of page 11. You know, I discussed this also before with the Secretary of Finance and another undersecretary. And my understanding is that this is okay with them because today, interest rates are so low to begin with. Wala nang arbitrage dyan. Not to mention, we are trying to lend more money to our businesses because there's a problem in their cash flow. So lalaki ang liabilities din ng mga kumpanya natin because they lack liquidity, Mr. President.
All right. You are proposing to delete from line 21, starting with the word provided, all the way to 10A and the first 4 lines of 11, page 11.
That is correct.
And leaving a period on line 21 after the word income. What does the sponsor say?
Mr. President, I'm familiar with this issue, and in fact, DOF has a very strong position on this. I will read the response into the record. It took me a while to understand this, so I hope our colleagues bear with me. I can give you a copy if it will help with the understanding. But basically, Mr. President, interest expense has been known to be used as a common tax saving device through a tax arbitrage system. Under this scenario, taxpayers secure a loan simply to generate interest expenses to then reduce taxable income and enjoy the corresponding tax benefit that comes from a lower taxable income. The funds loaned are then deposited in a bank to yield interest income. Interest income is subject to a final withholding tax, which is less than the regular corporate income tax rate. In effect, this allows the taxpayer to enjoy a double tax benefit, one on the deduction of interest expense and another on the lower tax rate for income. So that is the main reason, Mr. President, why.
If I may, yes.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
I'll just spread that into the record, and then of course His Honor can share with us his thoughts on this. So, but
Yes.
basically, that is the reason that DF has that position. Sabi
Yes.
po nila, let me just end, no? Considering that our existing usury laws are suspended, parties to a loan agreement are free to stipulate the rate of interest and can charge as much interest as agreed upon. When combined with the removal of the reduction of deductible interest expense, taxpayers can easily enter into a simulated loan agreement and take advantage of the fully deductible interest expense while maximizing the lower tax rate imposed on the interest income once reinvested. So for that reason, the DOF does not approve of this, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Senate President Pro Temp, please. I
yes,
would like to hear
yes,
your thoughts.
Mr. President, my thoughts on this are as follows. No? Interest expense is a regular expense for business. Okay? It is unfair that we do not allow them to deduct interest expense in their business. Okay? To me, these are problems in the tax code. And if we want to make it simpler for business to undertake their business, we should allow them to deduct their interest expense. Okay? I think 99% of businesses will not borrow money and to deposit it in a bank that will earn them interest income, especially today that interest rates are so low. So I do not see the tax arbitrage. Now, in 1998, during the Asian financial crisis, when interest rates were at 30%, then there's a possibility. But today, interest rates are so low. What is the tax arbitrage when interest rates are almost zero? And, I've discussed this several times with the Secretariat. My impression then in the beginning, even prior to the pandemic, was that it was acceptable. But I think, Senator, I've said as much. And Senator Dick would like to say something also. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. President, may I
Thank
have the floor?
So,
What happened to our majority floor leader, Mr. President? I'm requesting to have the floor if I may.
okay, Senator Gordon is recognized.
Thank you. I'm glad that the majority floor leader has a apparition again.
Sorry, Mr. President. I had to take a bathroom break. I don't want to make paalam when I have to take a bathroom break. Nakakaya naman.
Mr. President, I would like to support this proposal of Senator Rector, principally because, again, going back to my previous statements in previous days, this bill really tries to get people to come in here and not to ruffle the bushes so much and allow them to come in because we have liberal, tax, what do you call it, initiatives. At the same time, Mr. President, when we start talking about the purpose of this law, and I think I've said that earlier, we need to get them to come in here because there is a pandemic throughout the whole world, and everybody. And I think I have something here that says in the a release, I think from the Economist, if I'm not mistaken, it says Philippine economy to suffer worst drop in Southeast Asia. So every effort must be made to try and ease not only doing business in the country, but try to incentivize them more to come here. That's why I strongly support, Mr. President, the amendment of Senator Recto. And I think we should remember that in our discussions, not to belabor it, but to just be worried about it, because anything that we do that will make business, unlike us, benefits the other countries within the region. And we're not exactly the best looking guys in the block because we have high power rates. We have other problems involving our corruption. And I hate to say that. And according to one to the World Competitiveness Yearbook results, the Philippines is least attractive on the following indicators: quality of corporate governance, government competency, and policy stability and predictability. That's all, Mr. President. I just wanted to remind us of that caveat. Thank you, sir. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you. In addition, Mr. President, this amendment of mine also ties very well with the progressive tax rates. It will be an administrative nightmare for the BIR if we adopt a progressive system to continue with this provision, Mr. President. Remember, we will adopt, assuming we do adopt a progressive tax rate, then it is necessary to take this out also in the tax code, Mr. President. So with the proposed progressive weighted CIT rates, implementing a limitation and deductible interest expense is very complex since there will be varying tax arbitrage rates. This will not only discourage voluntary compliance but also complicate tax administration on the part of the BIR. So I just wanted to put that on record as well, Mr. President.
Mr. President, for the record also, no, for our colleagues who are perhaps might have just heard of this now or not so familiar, please know that under the current system, we are allowed to deduct 33% of the interest income. So it's not as if hindi deductible ang interest income, no? Please, let's be clear about that. If you earn income on your interest, 33% can be deducted. And the reason that there is a cap is because nga without any usury law, like I said, a company could enter into a simulated agreement and say that, oh, ang interest ko dito is triple or whatever, 20%, 30%, and would be able to deduct the whole thing. And that is the reason for that cap, Mr. President. On
Yes,
that
yes.
note,
Yes, I understand that. One last point, Madam Chairman. Assuming we adopted progressive rates, will this provision still apply? Hindi na pwede, di ba? You may ask the resource persons from the DOF.
according to them, Mr. President, it would still apply.
With
But,
different
if I may-
rates? Assuming we had 10, 15, 20, 25, this will apply if this is written based on a single unitary rate.
It would still apply, Mr. President, but it would be subject now to adjustment because there would be different rates. In any case, Mr. President, since His Honor is connecting this with the progressive rate, then can we shelve this again because it is related
Yes.
to the progressive rate? Because
Yes, that's
otherwise
fine to me. Yes,
I would
that's fine
tend
to me.
to, yes, okay, so let's do that, Mr. President. Salamat.
Okay, thank you very much.
So
Mr.
again,
President.
we table the proposed amendment. We do not reject it.
Mr. President, before
Senator
okay,
Gordon.
we'll table it, Mr. President. I just wanted to make a comment on the discussion. May I add, as
Go
of October 15, 2020, overnight deposit rate is at 1.75%, Mr. President.
Correct.
It really is it's a flea bite, Mr. President.
That's what I'm saying.
And what I'm saying is, Mr. President, I think that when you talk about usury, Mr. President, yung mga Bombay na lang na talagang bumabanat doon sa mga maliliit na tao. Pero yung mga corporation, di uutang sa Bombay yan, Mr. President. Sorry, I'm not being racist. I'm just saying that just to show sometimes we have to be realistic with what's happening. And I just want to say also that if assuming for the sake of argument, some corporation still is foolish enough to say, I borrowed money and I want to deduct 20% or 30% so that I can take advantage of the deductions. That should set off alarms, bells, and whistles, Mr. President, to the BIR right away. Ang laki-laki niya, nakakautang ka ng 1.75% sa bangko. Why will you do that? So I think a little bit more of a reality check, Mr. President, to the Department of Finance. It's good to be collecting taxes all the time, but in reality, the main problem really, and I want to emphasize this again as a basic principle that we're facing, is that BIR is not able to collect taxes, Customs is not able to meet its targets, and there are all kinds of suggestions of computerization, which I understand many in the BIR are trying to resist, Mr. President. In 2019, the BIR collected only 2.17 trillion out of a target of 2.27 trillion. On BOC, out of target of 661 billion, only 630 billion was collected. But if they really want to collect, kaya yan, Mr. President. But without casting any more aspersions, I think that we really have to look at that direction. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank
Mr.
you,
President. Yeah. Mr.
ahead, ma'am.
President,
Senator Villar.
I want to make a manifestation that if you are really in business, you don't do this. You really earn money from your business, not from this kind of transaction. I mean, it's really something different. Those doing this are not really businessmen. They are, I don't know how to describe them, but if you are really in business, you don't do this.
They're cheats.
In the first place, i-judge yung iyong ano yung hindi mo gustong marami kang utang kasi the banks will see if you are a reliable company that they can lend to you if you control your borrowing. So you don't borrow just to earn interest. No, you're more concerned about how the banks will look at your business. That's it. So I guess this is more of an exception rather than the rule. Thank
Just-
you.
Mr. President,
Yes, the Minority Leader.
just to weigh in, earlier I asked the question, how much is the foregone revenue on an additional 50% on wages? And I asked that question because I suspect that the foregone revenue could be substantial. In this particular case, it's I don't think it's worth all our time to debate. This is the minimum is, and the other principle, Mr. President, is corruption is would always be would always thrive when you grant discretion. And here, by just deducting the whole, allowing the taxpayer to deduct the interest payments would no longer require a computation. You reduce the discretion, and therefore, to that extent, you reduce the corruption. But to me, the most telling argument why we should adopt this is I don't think the foregone revenue is substantial if you allow this. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Well, I've already stated my position that we will shelve it because it is tied into the progressive, graduated rates that the Senate President pro temp has also proposed. But on that note, on the foregone revenues, this representation always seeks to look at that, and that's really one of the main drivers for the parking, because either the information is not available or I have to weigh it since I do not know what the other proposals will be. What might be viewed as a small foregone revenue impact. If we look at it all together, if they're all 5 billion times 10 that I accepted, then that's 50 billion, and I just need to be accountable for that. That is all I am trying to do, Mr. President, so that when I present it to everyone, I can say that of the 5 amendments, ito yung pinakamalaking impact, pero baka sa tingin nyo, ito yung complicated, masyadong may rooms for discretion, so therefore, what decision do we want to make? Rest assured that I'm looking at all of this. So in this
Thank you very
particular case,
much.
I do have the foregone revenues, if I may just complete my statement. It is 4.6 billion loss at the current rate. So many of you have mentioned that maliit ang interest ngayon. So I asked, what is it at the current rate? And it is 4.6 billion loss a year, for the record. I have similar figures for the others, and later on, we can all look at it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor. That's fine with me, Madam Sponsor. Now, moving forward, with the permission of my colleagues and the Senate President, on page 11, line 18, before I propose the amendment, Mr. President, is the sponsor familiar with Section 57 regarding withholding of tax at source?
Well, to a certain extent, we are
Yes.
familiar.
Yes, thank you. On withholding of creditable tax at source. Yes, Mr. President. Isn't it that today, for goods, the withholding is 1%?
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay. And for services, it is 2%.
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay. But then there's a provision in the tax code that gives the discretion of 1 to 15%. Right? Would the sponsor be amenable to clarify this to ensure that we withhold only 1% for the purchase of goods and 2% for the purchase of services. Then we will show the amendment on our screen. Yes.
Yes, Mr. President, we confirm.
Okay. Now you will see that there is but not more than 15% of the income payment. Okay. Who do we tax at 15%, Mr. President?
Sorry, I missed that question. Can His Honor repeat it, please?
Yeah. No. First, is the sponsor willing to accept this amendment in the screen?
Oh, sorry, I did not see that yet. Sorry.
Okay. So we just limit it to 1% for goods and 2% for the purchases of services.
Can you please read again your proposed amendment, because the stenographers are not
Okay.
familiar with the.
On page 11, line 18, insert a new section to read as follows. Section, we don't know what section that will be yet because we have to renumber all of it. Section 57 of the NIRC as amended is hereby further amended to read as follows. Section 57, withholding of tax on source. Paragraph A, paragraph B, withholding of creditable tax on source. The Secretary of Finance may, upon the recommendation of the Commissioner, require the withholding of a tax on the items of income payable to natural or juridical persons residing in the Philippines by payer corporations, persons as provided for by law, the rate of not less than 1% but not more than 32% thereof, which shall be credited against the income tax liability of the taxpayer for the taxable year, provided that beginning January 1, 2019, the rate of withholding should not be less than 1%, but not more than 15% of the income payment. That first proviso I included in the train law. Now we're moving it forward, Mr. President. The second proviso now is provided further that beginning January 1, 2021, the rate of withholding shall be 1% for the purchase of goods and 2% for the purchase of services or of the exercise of profession of the income payment. Or no? Or, correct. Yes. Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
What does the sponsor say?
Just to clarify, this honor, this representation got a little bit confused because the 1% and 2% are not being changed. Is that correct? Because that is the existing rate. Is that
Correct.
That's the existing withholding tax?
That is
we
correct.
agree? That is
Yes.
correct.
Yes, we're leaving it as at those two rates.
Yes, no
1%
change.
for good, 2% for services. Yes.
And what about, wait, 1% for the purchase of goods and 2% for the purchase of services, which is the
Yes.
existing rate, so no change. Or the exercise of the profession. So what is the proposal? 2%? Is that it? Does that 2% refer to both the purchase of services or the exercise of profession? Is that the proposal?
Yes, to include the professionals, Mr. President, as part of services. Because today, not only professionals who do not have an employee-employee relationship. Halimbawa,
Yes.
you have entertainers na marami today na wala ng trabaho yan. Okay? So today, look at their situation. Huh? Or professional athletes. Huh? They are withheld 15% plus a 12% VAT on gross. That's 27%. Okay? Many of them have lost their jobs today. And I'm saying that if we withhold from big corporations, and I'm not taking that out, 1% on goods and 2% on services, why not just make everyone, professionals included, as part of services, 2% lang? they're still liable to pay the VAT of 12. We're not taking that out.
Mr. President, I am just conferring with my staff and the resource person. Can I ask for a minute suspension?
Sure, sure.
Session suspended.
Mr. President, are we resuming?
Yes, we resume the Senator
you.
Pia Cayetano.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, just for where we are right now, we are discussing the proposal of the Senate President Pro Tem on the withholding tax rates. While we were on break, I asked DOF to provide me with some data to help me understand the current situation. And I am told that there are different rates of withholding tax depending on who is paying and to whom it is paid. And there are reasons for it, and that is why they still prefer that we keep those ranges. So for the body, I want to be able to present those so that everybody can understand it. So for that reason, I asked that we shelve this so that they can prepare that, and then we can get back to it, and I can show you why and under what circumstances are there different rates, Mr. President. So may I ask that we shelve this and move to the next point? Thank you.
No problem with me, Mr. President. With the permission of the President and the sponsor, let me move forward. We are now, my next amendment will be on page 11. This will be in relation to the VAT. I have two more left as far as the income side and the VAT is concerned. And thereafter, we will now be moving to the rationalization. No? So with your patience, Madam Sponsor, on page 11, line 23, is where my amendment will be. Okay? Now, let me explain this, Mr. President. There are three portions here, but let me first start with housing. Okay? If you take a look at the tax code, a house and lot of 1.5 billion, we wrote this during the VAT law in 2004. Okay? 1.5 billion pagka-residential lot valued 1.5 billion in 2004, VAT-free yan. Okay? If you follow inflation to where we are today, that should be adjusted to 2.5 billion. Okay? Pag house and lot naman, in 2004, it was 2,500. If you add inflation through the years, 16 years after, in 2020, the value of that is 4.2 million. Okay? Now, we are proposing so that there is more business, malaki ang multiplier effect ng housing, and there is a need. 6.5 million ang kulang natin. And today, halos wala naman tayong budget for housing. Really, this is private sector led, Mr. President. No? So if you want more business activity and make it a little cheaper for borrowers, then I propose that we adjust these figures, Mr. President, to reflect inflation over the years, and that would be the rate. And that every 3 years thereafter, they adjust these values with the consumer price index. That's for paragraph P, Madam President. Would this be acceptable to the sponsor?
Mr. President, just a few clarifications. So number
Yes.
one, the major objective here is to simply update the price due to inflation, because this law
That is
was
correct.
passed. Yes. Just to spread into the records, I am a big supporter of this. I have come across so many laws, including penalties, Mr. President, in the revised penal code that was passed in 1930. So they do not correspond to the value of money today. So if that is the major objective, I don't see why we have to peg it at a lower price. I don't think, I mean, if the objective when it was passed and His Honor, but His Honor was not the author at this time, no, 1992. No.
I was in 2004. That was in the VAT law.
The VAT law, sorry, I was looking at the Urban Development Housing, the VAT law. So His
Yes.
Honor has personal knowledge that at the time it was passed, the objective was to peg it at the current price. And therefore, that current price is not current anymore due to inflation.
That is correct.
That is correct. And is there any other purpose for this that I may not be understanding, Mr. President?
The other purpose, now that we are in a pandemic and the economy is going down, you want more business activity.
Yes.
You want to create more housing, to create more demand. And malaki ang multiplier effect nito in the economy.
Yes. And the third being, as chair of the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, providing for housing, decent housing, is a sustainable development goal. And I believe that
That's
we
correct.
need to use all our resources to help address that. So, Mr. President, my reservation would be, if we were simply pulling a number out of nowhere, then that obviously, again, representing DOF being your chair
Yes.
of Ways and Means, I would have to defer. But I am prepared to accept this subject to DOF providing other figures that may be different from His Honor's presentation. Because otherwise, I
But-
see the objective that is intended to be achieved here, and I accept, Mr. President.
That's fine.
Subject to DOF presenting some other data. Thank you.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
fine with me. Based on CPI index, because I'm sure we will arrive at the same number.
Okay. Thank you.
About. So that's fine with me. So thank you for that, Madam Sponsor. So
For the record,
Um,
also, Mr. President, with the gentleman from Batangas, allow me, we fully support this proposal of the gentleman from Batangas.
Yes, Mr.
Yes.
President,
Minority Leader, Senator Drilon.
yes, parliamentary inquiry, the sponsor, or Senator Recto made a proposal. The sponsor said, we accept subject to verification of the figures from the Department of Finance.
with regard to the consumer price index, if the computation is accurate as I presented,
So assuming it is not accurate, what happens next, Mr. President?
it will be accurate, Mr. President. I'm confident of that. So
Well, if you're confident of that, so the sponsor has accepted, and therefore that should be it. We consider it approved, Mr. Chair.
All right, that's yes, I was about to ask the sponsor. So it is accepted, subject to.
Yes, so it's basically just a heads up that
Accurate.
I may request to reopen it if I get different
Yes.
figures, Mr.
All
President.
right, all right. Any objection?
Yeah.
Hearing none, adopted.
Sige.
thank you very much, Mr. President. And same here, in the same section. There is also,
11.
yes, on the same page, right after that paragraph, can I show it on the screen? So,
Yeah, please. But please
Yes.
read it into the record.
yes, I will read it. Yes. So after the housing, which letter P, we are including now letter R. Okay. Maybe I can do it this way. There are three in the VAT left, no? R, BB, and CC. Okay. Can we make it smaller para mabilis tayo? Kaya pang ulitan.
There
Okay.
you go.
Okay, here. R. Today, sale, importation, printing, or publication of books is VAT-free. Ang dinadagdag lang natin dito, including those made or in digital or electronic format. Libro din yan eh. Okay? So that's the new normal. Okay? So I think that should be VAT-free too. Okay? In paragraph BB naman,
Maybe
We're saying-
can we do it one paragraph at a time
Sure.
unless they're related? Would that be okay with the
that's okay
proponent?
with me. Yes, that's okay with me. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so let's do that.
So
What
on
does the
letter
sponsor
R, may I propound the question to help me understand before I give a response?
Yes.
Do I understand our situation correctly? Because I have been joining the hearings in the Committee on Trade on Internet Transactions, and as it stands, my understanding is when we purchase online products, and that would include digital products, I actually try to read my books online. They're not subject to Philippine tax. Would His Honor be able to help me on that? Because otherwise, I can go to DOF, no? But I'm just trying to understand the
Yes,
whole picture.
yes, that's correct. Although I'm not talking about purchasing in the internet. Here, all I'm saying is that sale of published digital books, journals, educational or learning materials. So not all purchases in the internet, only with regard to journals, educational or learning material made or published in digital or electronic format. Today, the publication of books is VAT free. So we're saying we're in the new age today. It's digital now, digital books. Should digital books be VAT free? I think they should.
Thank you. So basically, His Honor is saying, regardless of the situation with online purchases internationally or whatnot, His Honor is simply proposing that the difference in format should not be distinct. We should not distinguish the tax treatment in the difference in format.
That is correct.
Correct.
Okay. And for the reason, in addition to that, for the reason that your this representation is actually conducting my first very complex bill totally digitally. I do not have a printed copy. I am referring to the bill through my three iPads, or I think four for my staff. We share this if His Honor can see, and my laptop. I am a big proponent of digital because it is more environmentally friendly. Therefore, I accept.
Thank you very
Accepted. Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Thank you very much, Madam Sponsor. Then on paragraph BB, sale of
Mr. President, with the permission of Senator Recto, Mr. President,
yes, please.
Senator Tolentino.
just for the record, having heard, I was trying to catch up with the housing amendment proposed by the good senator from Batangas, which I truly support. But having heard that it evokes a vignette of memory of some kind regarding a big incident which occurred in my province years ago. It's a fire incident inside the Cavite export processing zone, which cost some lives and gutted down a big plant producing housing materials. So I'm now tying it up with what I've heard before, the debate between the incentives and the revenue measures. So it probably ignited my imagination on how I will proceed with the incentives measures which we will be tackling in the next few days. Pinagsama ko lang po yung we're helping housing, and I remembered I mentioned a while ago just for the records that I recall a big fire incident inside the Cavite export processing zone. Doon ko lang po nalaman na tayo pala nagpo-produce ng housing materials for the Japanese market. At may kakulangan tayo sa housing ngayon, ay baka dumating po sa pagkakataon na itong mga locators sa Cavite Export Processing Zone na nagpo-produce ng housing materials ay mawalan pa ng incentives. Just for the record, Mr. President, I fully support the amendment of Senator Recto. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much to the distinguished representative, Senator from Cavite, kababayan ko rin. Thank you. Madam Sponsor, on double B, again, this is part of Sustainable Development Goals. Sale or importation of all prescription drugs and medicines, especially now we are in a pandemic. Ang PhilHealth hindi pa nga makabayad ng testing sa Red Cross. Ito limited until December 31, 2023.
Mr. President, sorry, just by way of order, I believe
Yes.
Senator Francis Tolentino has an amendment on AA. I can discuss it, but he's there. So just for order, is it okay, Senator Recto?
Yes.
AA, because this is AA.
Yes,
Senator
please.
Tolentino, are you still there?
I'm here, but I think I already submitted the hard copy to your honor's office. So I'm in a remote position. I'm not. Yes. So I guess you're authorized to proceed with the proposed amendments from this representation with my full concurrence, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Can I just ask for a minute suspension because this is A, B. There are a couple of numbers here, and Senator Tolentino and Senator Recto have comments. I will just confer with my staff to be sure that I understand the difference between each one. Just a short suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended. recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a manifestation. If I could also be informed about the discussion on about the budget, because I'm also handling some budgets. I just caught the tail end along with the Senate President, because we were in the Senate session was suspended, so we did not catch it. So can we just get a formal information when and if that is finalized? Thank you.
You want it now?
No, I don't need it
Okay.
now. It's just that kinabahan ho ako kasi may narinig akong iaatras
Mr.
na
President.
baliktad October 15.
Mr. President,
Eh, di ba
Mr. President,
15 yun? So,
yeah,
No. It's going to
Mr.
be
President, yeah.
Very
May we
brief,
recognize
short.
Senator Angara, Mr. President. He'll just give a short briefing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Pia, who's a senior vice chair sa finance. No, we were just discussing the new schedule, November 9, as suggested by our leadership. So we've moved our session up 1 week, and I just found out. So now we're working on a new budget schedule based on the suggestions of our vice chairs, Senator Ping, that we set a deadline for the submission of the subcommittee reports. So we'll coordinate with your offices and we'll release a schedule in the coming days, Your Honors, Mr. President.
Okay.
thank you. May I request though that I heard the date of October 15. I will die. That's today.
No.
So-
No.
October 16.
No. Towards
House
the end
said
of
they
October yung submission, or early
Okay.
November, towards the end of
Thank
October.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honors.
All right. So, Senator Cayetano.
Thank you. Mr. President, there are submissions from two colleagues, proposed amendments on AA, BB, and CC, all regarding medical supplies. I need to put the two together, so I will have to shelve this so that I can, because they're quite different proposals. So I will have to look at them and then perhaps come back with a compromise for our colleagues, Mr. President, in the interest of trying to achieve what both gentlemen would like to do, Mr. President.
So
Yeah.
May we shelve it?
So the proposed amendments of Senator Recto, BB and CC will be affected by the other amendments from the other
Yes.
colleagues that are with you,
Yes, Mr.
and
President.
that you are still going to reconcile them.
Yes, Mr. President.
Therefore, we table the proposal.
Yes, Mr. President.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Senator Recto.
They're similar. So that's okay with me, Mr. President. One last amendment on the income side of this particular bill. Then thereafter, we will now go to the rationalization of fiscal incentives. Mr. President, may I ask the sponsor if she's aware that for those whose gross sales are below 3 million, in effect not subject to VAT, that there is being imposed under our tax code a 3% percentage tax. 3%
President.
gross. Okay? Now, those hit here are micro enterprises. Similar to our debate on the MCIT, that's 2% of gross. Plus the 3% percentage tax, that's 5% of gross. Not to mention, they have to pay regular income tax. Okay? The regular income tax today is at 30%. And we said that roughly for micro, maging 10%. Okay? Under the progressive schedule. Huh? But still, on top of that, like I said, even malugi sila, they still have to pay 3% of percentage tax. My proposal is to delete this all the same. Either that or for 3 years suspend the 3% percentage tax for those whose gross sales are below 3 million, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. President, again, just to clarify, His Honor is saying for those whose gross sale are under 3 million, do not subject them to the 3% tax.
Yes, 3% gross, huh?
3% gross tax. And His Honor also mentioned that to recall that there is also MCIT that they may have to pay, no, because as of now that's also tabled. No, there's there is also recommendation to
Correct.
delete that provision.
Correct.
One question, and then I'll give a response. Is his honor aware if is this a new provision under train, or has this been existing longer than that?
That has been existing since since 1998, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President.
I'm just checking, Mr. President, if I can quickly spread into the record the revenue generated from the 3%, so that we can just include that in our discussion. Okay, billion, a billion, no? Okay. So for the record, in 2019, our collection for that 3%, Mr. President, is 10.2 billion, 10 billion and 250 million. In 2018, it was 14.4 billion. In 2017, it was 21 billion. So medyo malaki to, no? And as the minority floor leader pointed out, as we go through each one, it's important that we look at the revenue impact. Yung sa MCIT, did I spread that into the record? I'm not too sure, Mr. President, if I was able to spread that into the record. In
Just to
any case,
yes,
yes, I was going. Please proceed.
yes. You will notice that those numbers are going down. Okay?
Yes, it was higher, I think, in 2017.
Correct. As
last one,
mentioned,
yes.
those numbers are going down. Kasi hirap na hirap yung micro-business enterprises to survive paying this. Okay? More so today that yung karamihan na 150,000 establishments na nagsara are micro-enterprises. In fact, you will not collect anything pag nagsara yung 3 million pababa. Or they will not even, what do you call this? They will not even register anymore with the BIR. Remember, we are in a pandemic. Okay, now having said that,
Yes, go ahead.
yeah. Having said that, my fallback position here is, okay, why not for the next 3 years so that they can survive? If we're gonna repeal it all together, then maybe only for 3 years. Suspend its implementation for 3 years. Pag nag-regular na tayo, then we can impose the 3% again or collect the 3% from them.
Noted on that, Mr. President. But because it is similarly situated to the MCIT proposal, I will ask that we also shelve this. I'm asking for some details because they have a different reason that they are giving me as to why it went down. So I couldn't understand it just listening to it quickly. So I asked them to explain it further. So may I move to shelve this as well, so we can discuss this later on while they are giving me the figures that I'm requesting.
Sure, that's fine with me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, we are now on page 12. Okay. Now, this is the more difficult part, Mr. President, of the bill. No? Here, we're creating already, in effect, the FIRB. Okay? Under this section. Okay? Okay. Before I proceed with the amendments, I will take the position now of Senator Dick Gordon. In the beginning, he said, let's discuss the principles first of the fiscal incentives and the role of the FIRB and what to do with the IPAs. It will be very difficult to propose amendments without knowing what we intend to do. Now, with the indulgence and the patience of my colleagues, of all our colleagues and the sponsor, I'd like to present something in the screen, no? The different, where we are today. Okay? This is the situation. My first proposal, Mr. President, to simplify, and then we can work on, I have the amendments ready for any situation. Okay? But let me first simplify. Okay? We all know what CREATE is all about already. Okay, particularly the rationalization of fiscal incentives. My first proposal is, okay, why not exclude from FIRB, PESA, SBMA, Clark Development Corporation, ano yung isa? AFAG? Bataan, Freeport,
AFAB.
AFAP, APECO. These five will not be part of the IPAs that will be under the FIRB, ergo status quo for these five IPAs. Okay? Status quo yan. Now, and remember, I'm trying to work here with the Department of Finance. We're bending backward also. The Department of Finance wanted 13 IPAs under the FIRB. In this proposal, I'm saying, why not exclude the five and all the rest be under the FIRB? The biggest of which under the FIRB will be the Board of Investments, which takes care
What is
of the domestic market. Okay? Diba? Okay? So that is a one model that we can do. Ibig sabihin, pareho pa rin ang PESA, pareho pa rin ang SBMA, hindi sila subject ng FIRB. Okay? So that's one. No? This protects the jobs we have in Batangas, and we feel that we can promote more investments in this situation. Okay? Let me reiterate or repeat that the biggest IPA will be under the FIRB, which is the BOI. In fact, during our interpellation, data was presented na mas malaki yung investments under the BOI than the IPAs or even PESA. But PESA being the second biggest. Okay? So that's one model, Mr. President. The other model, option 2, is we distinguish, which we have today to a certain degree, between investors into the domestic market and investors willing to locate in the Philippines to sell to the foreign market. Frankly speaking, I feel that the incentive should be different. Okay, as I mentioned during our interpellations, the biggest incentive for investors to invest in the domestic market is that you're 110 million Filipinos. Okay? And the reason why investors would want to come to the Philippines to sell to the rest of the world is because they feel it will be cheaper or more efficient to do it in the Philippines. Okay? Ergo, I think we should have two separate fiscal incentive regimes for the two. Now, if the DOF says that these incentives already under CREATE are good enough for the domestic market, so be it. Hindi ko na pakikialaman yan. Okay? But I think for the export market, let us retain the incentives of 4 to 7 years income tax holiday and 5% gross income for as long as they are exporting. Okay? That's the second model. Okay? So we're differentiating it not by IPA, but by industry. Domestic vis-a-vis export. Incidentally, today, more or less, that's the situation. Okay? With a few aberrations. PESA, halimbawa, is 90% is export. BOI, 90% is domestic. Okay? Then the third option, assuming I fail in option 1 or we don't like option 1, assuming we don't like option 2, then the third model is, 1, let's do a grandfather rule na muna. 1.6 million jobs might be in peril if we don't adopt a grandfather rule. Plus, pinangako na natin yan. And they already invested in the country. And you don't want to change the rules of the game in the middle of the game, so to speak. Okay? And, we've discussed this already lengthily during the period of interpolations. But then I would propose, so ito, one fiscal regime lang for both domestic and for exports. Okay? I would propose, following the formula of the CREATE bill, na depending on the type of industry, location, that the ITH be anywhere from 4 to 7 years. For, let's say, Metro Manila, 4, 5, 6, 7 as you go farther from Metro Manila by location. But then the special corporate income tax rate na may hangganan, instead of 3 to 6 years, 10 years. Okay? But then the SCIT rate will remain at 5% gross income. Pero may limited time for 10 years. Okay, that takes care. So the grandfather rule will take care of the existing jobs. And we are hoping that the fiscal incentives we do here will still be attractive. Okay, we are hoping that it will still be attractive. I think this is better than the 10% naman, because I think the 10% will not be attractive. Okay, so this is the recommendation. Then based on whatever we agree on, or of course, any of our colleagues can make amendments to this, present their own models, I would have, for at least for this three options that I presented, I would have amendments for all these options already, Mr. President. No? And we are on page 12, and the bill is roughly 48 pages. So 36 pages of amendments depending on which model you choose. Because it will also affect the repealing clause. Because there are many laws that we are repealing here, Mr. President. So I hope that's clear enough to our colleagues. And I invite the responses, comments on these proposals. And we're always open to whatever amendments, suggestions, of course, by any of our colleagues, Mr. President.
Thank you to His Honor for presenting that. I appreciate the time that he has taken to come up with three options. It makes my life easier when I know that our colleagues have considered different options. So at least we have choices, Mr. President. What I would like to do, and I understand pretty much the different choices. There may be fine details I would need to clarify, but I pretty much understand, especially the difference between the first and the second, the last two, no? In the
Yes.
first one, FIRB would only have jurisdiction over a few IPAs, as the other FIRBs, the other IPAs are carved out. And then in option 2, His Honor, instead of carving out IPAs, carved it out by industry, no, which would be made a distinction in the incentive treatment for exports and the rest.
Yes, correct.
And then in the third option, His Honor provided for a grandfathering rule for the current investors, regardless of who they are and where they are located, and then came up with amended number of years for the incentives. In a nutshell, is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. We've discussed this very briefly,
Yes.
about 2 or 3 nights ago, Mr. President.
Yes, and that's why I said I have a general understanding. I may need more details, but I have a general understanding. I have two I'd like to proceed in two different possible ways. I'm also throwing back a choice to our body. I actually don't know, and maybe I'll direct this to Majority Floor Leader, how many of our colleagues are on board. Obviously, I can continue to have this discussion with Senator Recto. I'm assuming Senator Gordon is here, Senator Drilon. I don't know about the others, so that would help me decide how to proceed. But we can go into this detail, but at some point, we still would have to discuss the concern raised by the minority floor leader, which he said he is willing to forego, but then it is also the concern raised by Senator Gordon, and maybe it's in the mind of some of you, I am not really sure, on the one subject, one bill. So since I had in the back of my mind that when we start going into this title that now is on the FIRB powers and the incentives, we could then discuss again the one bill, one subject, one bill. Although this was exhaustively discussed, as far as I am concerned, by the minority floor leader in the period of interpellation, I will not prevent anyone who wants to present their position on this matter. Although, just for the record, I have listened intently when the minority floor leader presented his case, and I've also responded, putting on record the research that we have on the matter. On that note, then I would ask for the body's guidance. I guess it's Senator Recto who also made the proposal. The minority floor leader is raising his hand. Would you like to discuss that first before we move on to the next topic? I leave that with the body. Thank you.
Minority Leader, Senator Drilon.
Mr. President, we thank Senator Recto for giving the body the options that he has presented. May I suggest that we study this, taking into account the views raised by Senator Gordon at the start as a procedural matter? Because my view, Mr. President, is that the moment we can agree on one option, the amendments will be easy because we have guiding principles. But as long as we do not have that, then it will be a battle every single line. So my suggestion, Mr. President, to expedite our discussion, and so that we can come up with a common position. There should be a present to us. My view is the moment the body would agree on one option, the amendments will be easy because we will be referring back to that general understanding. Otherwise, I can assure you, Mr. President, that we go page by page, 67 pages to 40 pages. It will take us at least 1 hour for each page, hindi tayo matatapos. But if we adopt this, if we can come to an agreement as to which option, I can assure you, sir, that we will be able to finish this by next month. That's my submission, sir.
All right, before I ask the sponsor on what she favors among the options, or if none, what is your favor, Minority Leader?
Mr. President, it's not easy to say option 1, 2, 3. Give us time to review it carefully. And the point is, the moment we agree the moment we have the majority vote on one option, that should set the stage so that we are coming at a crossroads. We will vote on one option after reviewing it, or some amended option. But what I am raising as a possibility is that we agree on one option presented, either option 1, 2, 3, or option 4, or option 5. Sorry?
Are you not going to ask me which one I favor?
Well, we don't want to ask that, Mr. President, because you influence the whole body. So, but yes, I am making a proposal to enable us to pass this measure. Because if we cannot agree on this proposal, I can assure you that everybody will insist on or strongly argue for his point, because he or she sincerely believes that this is the correct method, and therefore ang lalabas po nito baka hodgepodge po eh. But if we agree on an option, we vote on one option, and we're not limited to the 3. We can have our own proposal of 4 or 5. But the point is, the majority should agree on one option, and then the amendments will follow that option agreed upon. That's my submission, as simple as it is.
Senator Cayetano, the sponsor.
Mr. President, I have no issue with his honor's suggestion. I am happy to look at the options that any of our colleagues would like to present. But may I bring back to the table that I also said there was another major issue which needs to be tackled unless nobody will bring it up anymore, so that we can dispense with that issue, Mr. President. The one
Issue is not-
subject, one bill, Mr. President, one title.
But if you take one or two of the options of Senator Recto, that option is that subject is already removed.
True. That's
believe,
true.
ah.
That's true, Mr. President.
That's what
Thank
I
you.
believe.
Thank you for simplifying that. That's true. I can do that. It might just take me a few minutes because, as I said, I'm quite familiar, maybe just some details. But my question is, can we proceed after we do that? Because my understanding from the minority floor leaders, he wants to study it. And he is also inviting others to propose. Because if the objective is to move it along now, I will look at it now, and I already have an idea of which is my preferred. I think the majority floor leader shared that already earlier with the body. But I will look at the paper because that's where the details are now. I have not seen that paper before.
Okay, Senator Tolentino. you're
Yes, Mr.
recognized.
President, I think you already answered that. My interjection would be relevant to the three options proposed plus the manifestation of the good minority leader. So would the selection of an option be dependent on the consequence of whether the bill will be divided into two, or is it a coherent consequence? So it's an chicken and egg situation, Mr. President, which I think the body should be able to decipher which is first.
May I
the-
respond, Mr. President? Well,
Well, just to not really answer, but just to rib the statement of Senator Tolentino. You know, I've said it before. Between which comes first, the chicken or the egg? It depends on what you're eating, breakfast or dinner. Yeah.
Mr. President, I'll try to,
Minority leader. Go ahead.
we'll try to respond to Senator Tolentino, as I was the one who originally brought this one subject on one bill. My thinking, Senator Tolentino, is that we come to an agreement on the option. Now, that does not remove from the table the issue of one subject, one bill. But if we can agree here, that is a matter which ultimately the Supreme Court would have to decide. And we cannot prevent anyone from bringing that issue to the Supreme Court. My thinking, Mr. President, is that if we can agree on an option 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, then we can proceed and tailor the bill in accordance with that agreement, 1 to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and then leave the matter of dual subject in one bill to the Supreme Court. Because in fact, there is another issue that will necessarily crop up. The matter of the ability of the executive branch to exercise the line item veto. Because even if we agree on 1, 2, 3, 4, if the position is that this is a revenue measure, then they veto and exercise the line item veto, and therefore frustrate the policy issues that we may have agreed on, because the president can exercise the authority of vetoing a line. So that is, my answer, gentleman from Cavite, is let's agree on 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5. And then on that basis, let us proceed with the amendments consistent with that principle. And at the end of the day, if we have agreed on everything, if somebody wants to test the consensus and propose a dual two bills, that is the prerogative of any member of the Senate. Just my point is, let us try to agree on what we can agree. At the end of the day, if that issue is still alive, nobody can prevent our colleague from presenting that for votation. But my suggestion is, let us come up and agree by a vote on 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. That is why I'm asking for time to study it and maybe present another option so that instead of voting per section, we agree on the option.
What,
Thank you,
how
Mr.
much
President.
time do you think is necessary? Your Honor, the Minority Leader, how much time do you think is necessary?
Well, next week, the problem is I do not know. I am not as bright as the Senate President pro tempore to be able to decide on the option tonight, to be honest.
If I may, Mr. President.
Sige,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay. These three options are actually models, and the minority leader is correct. We will have to choose one model. Now, it's not only subject to these three. There are senators who may want to propose another model. Okay. But having said that, once you have a model, madali na lahat ng amendments, Mr. President. Okay, having said that, mapapasa natin to. Okay? Second, let me put for the record, based on my conversations with the sponsor, she will be partial to option 2.
Option 2 is import-export.
Yes, domestic and export to a certain degree. I just wanted to pass that to the body. Okay? And remember, in all these options or all these models, we are bending backward and assisting also the DOF here. Because it would appear that under the CREATE, that model, marami talagang problema. Almost many, if not most of the senators. Okay? Listening to all the interpolations, we presented these three other models to make it easier for the body to decide on how do we proceed. Like we started, no? Income tax ang pinakamadali.
May we ask, the chair would like to ask the sponsor, no, the President pro tem.
Yes.
In the second model that you are proposing, the
Yes.
import-export,
Domestic and export,
what-
yes.
yes, where does the 5 eco zones classify?
There's all under the FIRB. Sa ilalim pa rin ng
Kasi you
FIRB.
are exempting 5 eh.
No, that's option 1. We're exempting...
Sa option 1.
Correct.
But if
Correct.
you favor option 2, what happens to these 5?
No,
They're under the FIRB, but...
Pero saan sila favored? Import-export. Saan
No.
sila classified?
They all have exports, Mr. President.
They're all export?
They all have.
They
So
all have
makikinabang
export.
silang lahat.
Yes, correct. So the point is, we will tailor fit a fiscal incentive regime, one for domestic market and one for the global market export. Okay, so that's option 2. Okay, my understanding with the sponsor is that this option seems to be more likable as far as the sponsor is concerned. No, this idea has been tossed also to the DOF. Okay, but of course, my first option was to carve out the 5. Okay, but I'm willing to work with the DOF, the sponsor, of course, with all our colleagues on option 2. Now, assuming hindi pwede pa yung option 2, then we have option 3. Okay? And like I said, anyone is open naturally to provide more models. No? Now,
Ano nga yung option 3?
Mr. President.
yeah, yung...
Grandfather,
yes. And
Yeah.
then, at least the grandfather kasi takes care already of the 1.6 million jobs eh. Now, we're lessening the risk na mawala ng trabaho yung iba. But then, we will agree to the incentives that they're being proposed with slight amendments to make it attractive para naman we can create jobs in the process moving forward. Okay?
All right. Senator
But
Lacson.
fiscal
Mr. President,
Thank you.
with the permission of Senator Recto,
Yes, go ahead.
before discussing these different options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, shouldn't we ask the sponsor first if she is amenable to splitting this measure into two? Kasi kung hindi naman siya papayag and it will come to a vote, and the vote favoring not to split this measure into two, then the options become irrelevant.
Not necessarily. Separate issue is even if you split it to two,
No,
the fiscal
assuming that the
you will still
sponsor,
have- correct.
the sponsor is not amenable to split this measure into two, then we're not talking of several options anymore.
No, we still will be. Assuming, okay, assuming we split the bill into two, assuming lang,
Okay.
you still have to choose a model for the fiscal incentives. You will still have to choose a model, okay? Ito, in my presentation, we're not splitting anything. Okay? Now, whether we split it or not, on the fiscal incentive side, you will still have to choose really a model.
On the fiscal incentive side.
Yes, yes. Or else hindi tayo matatapos. I think the minority leader understands this, including the sponsor, because it's how it's written. Okay? Hindi tayo matatapos if there's no meeting of the minds on how do we proceed. We didn't have to do that on the income side because that's a simpler part. This is a more complicated part. But unless you agree on a particular model, there is no way we can finish the amendments, Mr. President. Magiging hodgepodge lang tong bill na to. It will even be worse than where we started.
As I
Yes.
said earlier, in my opinion, if we choose
we're
this
working
or
on the
that-
assumption, as suggested by the minority leader, that even if we split this bill into two, sabay din nating i-approve. That's why we had to discuss the options. That's your premise.
Whether we approve it the same time or not, frankly speaking, you will still need to choose a model.
Yeah, but if the fiscal incentive side or portion comes after the approval of the first, which is the corporate income tax, baka hindi tayo mabot doon nga. That's my concern.
Yeah.
So we have to agree first. If assuming that the sponsor will agree to splitting this measure into two, then we should also agree that we should pass this simultaneously or at the same time. So we can discuss the options. Because kung isa lang yung, kung ano ba pumayag siyang split into two, and we pass the first portion, naiwan yung second portion, why are we discussing even the options, the models? That's my point.
Because my understanding is that we will pass both.
Yun ang assumption. It is
Yes.
premised on the assumption, as suggested by the minority leader, that we will pass it at the same time.
Not necessarily at the same time, but we will pass both.
Kaya gugulo.
But thank you for your question, sir.
Mr. President,
Yes, then Senator Drilon.
if we can agree on an option, and I assume that the sponsor, in close consultation with the Department of Finance, will agree to one option, then it's easy for us to pass this measure. The splitting of the bill, in my view, and I'm submitting this to you, is only critical for purposes of exercise of a line item veto. And why? Because I said historically the precedent is that the executive branch or the president has never exercised his line item veto over an incentive bill. But since this bill is fused into one, and that is, I asked directly the sponsor, and she said the president can exercise the line item veto. So that, to me, I agree with the Senate President pro tempore. The first thing we do is agree on how the fiscal incentive will look like. If we can agree on that, then I think the Department of Finance can also be comforted by the fact that since the Senate, all the senators have agreed on how the bill will look like, at that point, we split the bill, it should not be much of a problem. That's my view, Mr. President. So I go back, the first option, the first hurdle is that we come to an agreement on what option to take. And, or a combination of 1, 2, 3, or a fourth option, whatever. And once we come to that, because it's possible that some of our colleagues can say, all right, option 2 with a little modification, and however it looks like. And if that is acceptable to the body, then that is our guiding principle. And the remaining pages or sections which are sought to be amended, we can easily amend. I tell you, sir, so as I said earlier, without this kind of an agreement, kanya-kanya tayong amendment dito. At the end of the day, you will not recognize the kind of mongrel that we pass. Unless you have a common theme. That's what is attractive in the proposal of Senator Gordon. With Senator Gordon now, he has disagreed. But that's my view, Mr. President, and I submit.
Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President.
Yes, the Majority Leader.
Yeah, so there's several discussions on the floor on what we're supposed to vote for. We really need guidance on what they are. First, of course, is the splitting of the measure, but that does not have to reach that point if, according to earlier statement by the Senate President, is that we agree on an option. If we're going to agree on an option, we also have to know what the options are, because not all of us, again, are experts like Senator Recto. So we need to know the options. I think one of the options was to retain the incentives at the 5 zones, no, PESA, SBMA, CDC, AFAB, and APECO, as I can see there. And sinama mo ba, Senator Recto, yung APECO dahil kay Senator Sani Angara? Naisama mo yata dahil kay Sani.
Sinama ko yan, ako nagsama yan, pero kulang yan.
Ay, ikaw nagsama ba, Tito Dick? Okay. Meron namang may isa namang locator doon, di ba? So, okay pa naman.
Mr. President,
I think we need to clarify.
So, kidding aside, Mr. President, may just be allowed to finish, no? So, we have to choose these options. But the options, I think, are going to be the call of our chairperson, because she's the chairperson of the committee. We'll listen to her also if she accepts the options, because she also has the option not to accept. And then eventually, Mr. President, no, eventually we will have to decide on that, on the move of Senator Pia, whether she will accept the options or not, Mr. President, because we'll have to vote on option 1. If she says, no, I do not like option 1, therefore we'll have to vote on that. And then someone will propose option 2. Unless we can come out with a clear-cut option where everybody seems to be acceptable. It's acceptable to everyone, Mr. President. Because right now I'm confused what motion you will make, Mr. President, and what we will have to act on.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, how many options are there? I'm also confused.
At the moment, 3.
3, okay. Can we see all of them?
Yes. 4 including create. Create is option 1.
Okay.
So can we put it back on the, okay.
Something wrong with that one. Hindi ako makinig.
Of course, the finer details we can all amend, no? But it's basically a model, huh? So this is create, okay? The one on top, no? And then option 1, you just carve out PESA, SBMA, CDC, AFAP, APECO. So all
Okay.
of that status quo. And then whatever the bill says about all the others, FIRB, bahala sila if that will work or not. Okay, on the remaining IPAs, including BOI.
Right.
So whatever is in the bill, bahala sila. Okay?
What is the second?
Option 2?
Option 2, is we differentiate between
Domestic
domestic
and
enterprise
import.
and export.
Export. Okay.
Of course, all these numbers in between we can change, right?
What's 3, boss? What's 3?
Okay. 3 is we're following create, but first grandfather rule. Okay? And then we follow create, all the 13 IPAs are under FIRB, but let's make the incentives, well, I agree with them time bound here, but make the incentives a little more attractive naman than the 10% gross. So the 5% could be any number between 5 to 10, I suppose, right? And then the years also, huh?
Okay.
So
Okay,
your
got it.
option 3,
Thank you.
Ralph, your option 3, Ralph, is you would like to, Mr. President, with the permission of the body, no? Option 3 is you want to increase the sunset provision for all 13 IPAs and
No,
then increase.
yeah, wala
Is
na,
that-
wala na sunset to grandfather rule. So grandfather rule meaning to say, all those existing today, whatever they have, we cannot be an engine giver. Okay?
Okay.
But all the IPAs are under the FIRB. Okay? Then all new coming in, all new investors coming in, we will write now the new incentive package.
Did I hear you
but-
right?
but-
That they will all be under FIRB, under your option 3, Ralph?
That's
Mr.
option
Senator?
3. That's option 3, yes.
They will still be under the FIRB?
That's option 3. Okay? So this is the list of my options.
Well, may I
Please.
comment? May I
Yes.
comment?
Yes.
Mr. President, dear colleagues,
No.
Go ahead, Senator Gordon.
thank you, Mr. President. The reason why I was very insistent, because I was of going out with I should say baselines of what we should cover, is because we have to know where we're going. Because there are 24 senators, many of whom have their own concept. And that is, for example, people who want to make sure that we retain, I belong to that one. We retain all the incentives, we retain all the 13 IPAs, including TIESA, and don't change it. Sabi nga ni Senator Recto, sinabi ko rin, we cannot change the rules in the middle of the game and we lose credibility internationally. I don't agree that there should be a period upon which they will expire. I think that we should allow, for example, the future Congresses to say, we don't need it now, there's no more COVID, you shot your bolt, and therefore we should stop already. I want a free Congress that can actually act or react. The third thing that I want to say is that does this mean that we're no longer going to have free ports and special economic zones? And if we do, under what regime will they be at? And I strongly suggest again, I'm basically a free trader. In fact, I've even been mulling to make the whole country a free port and a special economic zone because we are separated from the Asian mainland. And we can be a separate territory from the entire Asian mainland that can actually allow local governments to now bring in investments all over the place in their own areas. No? So, to my mind, Mr. President, it is important. One, free port and special economic zones, that's the best one. That's what Subic has. That's what Cagayan has. That's what Aurora has and many others. Why is that, Mr. President? They are exports, and the thrust of a Subic, especially when you put it with Clark, and this is part of the original vision, was to make a free port that can compete with Hong Kong and Singapore. In Asia, we have 60% of the world here. We're competing with a giant like China, and therefore we should make the Philippines really, really competitive. Fourth, I'd like to include, of course, it doesn't have to be that way, but emphasize the fact that we should have a science park that will again accelerate our capability to compete because like Taiwan is about 3 or 4 parks. And for the record, Mr. President, it ain't bad to have a special economic zone. China has about 3,000 special economic, there are 5,000 special economic zones throughout the whole world. And among the developed economies, they have 374. And of course, China has 2,543. And the Philippines has 528, Mr. President, as of 2018. So I just don't want us to manacle, pupusasan natin yung kinabukasan ng bayan. I don't believe that we should have a straitjacket in economic initiatives. Why? The whole world is a moving target. A few years ago, China was the assembly plant of the world. So everybody was making a beeline. Lahat pumupunta sa China. Ngayon, nagbabago ang mundo. Nagbabago lalo ang mundo because of COVID. And therefore, and then there are rising economies that we have to, calibrate our strategy and be able to fine-tune. To me, the basic thing here is to fine-tune, not to change the whole thing, not to throw it out, but allow the Congress at any time in the future to enhance our incentives if we have to, or to fine-tune it and say, no more. Wala na, hindi ka na-perform. Tagal ka ng special economic zone, you're getting a budget, and walang ginagawa, then that is the prerogative of Congress. The long and the short of what I was suggesting, Mr. President, the other day, and like Frank and Ralph, I call, bibiro lang ako, no? The good, the bad, and the ugly. Mamili na lang kayo kung sinong ugly or bad or good. The point is, we share the same basic thrust, no? The basic principles of good government, which is consistency, predictability. Wala tayong corruption, bawasan natin ang corruption. Consistency in the way we run things. Hindi tayo magbabago just on a whim or a caprice. And obviously, the rule of law na kasama rin niya, kasama na ngayon predictability, consistency in the rule of law. And continuity, and of course, good government policy that is available there. That is all encompassed in the three principles that I was saying. And if we start doing that, and if you look at the picture of long-term economic scars from coronavirus, tayo ngayon ang pinaka-deadly. Tayo ang sinasabi na babagsak ang ekonomiya natin. Vietnam will have a better economy and better life than we are. These are the things that we have to know. It's just like reading a book called The Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. They're talking about London and Paris. And, that's prior to a revolution. And they're talking about, there's a spring of hope, there's a winter of despair. Things like that. I mean, that's the way the world is. It changes. I think it was Heraclitus who said there is always change. The only thing permanent is change. And that is why it's always good to have flexibility, to have innovation, Mr. President. And then, again, if you look at the foreign direct investments of our country, which I said the other day, Indonesia is already 13.6 billion. Vietnam has 8.65 billion. Philippines 2.9 billion. So on the argument that we have been left behind, again, I use the word biting the dust. Naiwan tayo sa alikabok. Naiwanan na tayo dati ng Japan after the war. Remember, World War II. Philippines was second to Japan in terms of the economy. And then after the Korean War, things started moving. And then in the 60s, Hong Kong was leading, and then Singapore, and then Korea after the Korean War decided to move. They started doing what we're doing now, and now they have moved again. They are now on the high value thrust of their economy, Mr. President. After they're now leaving, for example, shipping, which they started with the Park Chung-hee. He created steel plants, Mr. President, because he wanted steel. He wanted the jobs for his country. And now they're left that. They're now in heavy investments in value added, in artificial intelligence, in environment, and now, what are we now? Binibigyan tayo ng sobra nila, binibigyan tayo ng second hand nila ng military equipment, nagpapasalamat tayo sa kanila, they're always helping us. May iwanan na tayo yan. And now, are we going to be left behind by Thailand? Are we going to be part of that club? Thailand? Vietnam? Indonesia? Or are we going to be, again, the also run? Always, a bridesmaid, never a bride in all these parts of our conversation. Lahat ng facet of history in the last 7 decades or 9 decades or 7 decades, we've called ourselves the sick man of Asia. We're the straggler of Asia. We've never really gone up. So this is a very, very important bill that we're working on, Mr. President. That's why we have to be clear on where we're headed. What is our vision? Hindi ito pataasan ng yabang. Ang mga Batanggenyo sanay na sanay dyan. Di bali mawala yung yaman, wag lang mawala yung yabang. Yan ang biroan namin ni Ralph at saka ng mga Batanggenyo because that's true. Tayo, marami tayong yabang, pero tingin ng Batangas kayo, meron na rin silang science park doon. Meron na rin silang mga industrial. Why? Because they maximize their proximity to Manila. They maximize their seaport. Magkaroon sila seaport. And they're maximizing the airport. We're talking the other day about Bulacan. My God, you will now have a series of airports and seaports that should put us on the trajectory of a first stage rocket of leaving the second stage and now going out and orbiting the whole world and going to outer space and joining the ranks of the Asian dragons. When I was in Subic years ago, Mr. President, I said, we're not a dragon, but we're the new eagles of Asia, not because I'm from Ateneo, but because that's our eagle, the Philippine eagle. And our bird is bigger than the rest of the world. The Philippine eagle is the biggest bird in the world. And having said that, Mr. President, I'd like to see that in action. I'd like to see that indeed. All of us want to do that. Every one of us here, regardless of party affiliation, administration, etc., etc. But you see, we're locked into a situation where are we leaving the management of this country to theoreticians? I hope not. Are we leaving it to people who will say, basta sa amin lahat yan? I will not mince my words here. Mr. President, I see here that we're making the finance department, and in about 1 year and 7 months, should we allow the democratic continuity to come out, there will be a new administration. Tama yung question ni Frank Drilon the other day. What was he saying? Is this going to be pursued by the next administration? It's going to be the same thing. So, to my mind, what we're doing is a law for the ages for incentivizing our economy, our country, so that other people will now see that and I will quote again what I said in the 90s when I was running Subic, we are a sincerely changed country. That is why you always see me going up on, I don't say extrajudicial killing, I say motorcycle killings because that's very, very clear to me. There have been over 10,000 killings in the last so many years, and they continue on and nothing is solved. That's why we all stand up against corruption, Mr. President. That's why we always try to be ahead in everything that we have done, Mr. President. We were going to go ahead in tourism. But, again, we changed the slogans. So that's okay. We're still ahead. Now, this law that we're going to make will have to incentivize tourism because that's the biggest generator of jobs. This will have to incentivize SMEs. Kanina, I wanted to comment on the matter of accumulated earnings because that will favor, quite frankly, and I just kept quiet because let it move, that will favor the rich. Because sila ang may pera. Ang tao natin, ang bayan natin, ang nagpapasa ng burden of taxation is 99% yung withholding taxes. Patay ka, pag ikaw na empleyado ka, palagi kang, yun ang una po, ang kamay ng gobyerno nasa bulsa mo na, hindi mo pa nakukuha yung pera. Withhold na. Totoo po yan. Ang mayaman, meron silang mga accountants, and when they do that, they can have tax avoidance and everything like that. That is why the passion that I have for this bill is, I would say even by myself, enormous, Mr. President. We have to be careful here. We are at the crossroads. We are going to have to make a decision here for the ages. Are we going to come up with an ability now for the government to be flexible so that we can move forward? Batangas, no thanks to the other countries, Iloilo, and I'm not trying to flatter them, mayabang na yung mga yan. Si Recto at saka si Drilon, mayabang na yung mga yan. Hindi naman nawawalan ng yaman. They create yaman, Mr. President. Iloilo has been written about the other day. Subic tried to do the same thing. Clark is doing the same thing. So, Mr. President, as far as I'm concerned, let's try to be the statesman that we are. We always claim we are the senior house. Everybody has seen the country up and down, side to side, Mr. President, and therefore we should have a larger view of where we're going to go. The world will always step aside to let any man pass who knows where he's going. If you make that road narrower, Mr. President, as I think we're trying to do here, sinisikipan natin yung pagkakataon na bumusilak at bumulwak yung investment sa ating bansa. Nako, magbabayad tayo for the next several years because mas mahirap mag-invest. Mas mahirap kumuha ng mga law that will change all this. Hindi pwedeng mabagal tayo, magbagawa pa tayo ng law para makahabol. No, Mr. President, we will must rather arm our country with the wherewithal of a law that will allow them to say, all right, we will allow more incentives or we will reduce incentives. We will focus on this target in Asia. In China, we will try to get this one, and this is the way we're going to get it. Mr. President, sorry to say, I think that I paid my dues when we lost Subic, when we lost the employment of the Americans. We had to really work hard. We were having 20-hour days when we went to Japan, when we went to the United States, even to China. Ganun rin sa tourism. It's not easy to get investments just because you're in the center of Asia, away from the Asian mainland, just because we have a learned population. Doesn't mean that these guys are going to come in. They will always have plenty to say. And they will never have enough, Mr. President. They will say, oh, you're giving us 5%. But that's only 17% when you compare yourself with other countries. Mas mababa yung binibigay sa amin. They will never be enough. But always my answer is yes. Lahat yan kasama. Incentives kasama. Quality of work kasama. I was telling the other day, when you say incentives in Singapore is 17%, regular CIT rate. Cambodia is 20%. Talo na naman tayo. We're going to go down to 25% and ultimately to 22%. Talo pa rin tayo dyan. Thailand is 20%. Vietnam is 20%. Laos is 24%. Talo na tayo dyan. Nauna na sila. Malaysia is 24%. Indonesia is 25%. And the Philippines is 30%. I credit this administration 1,000-fold by coming in and saying we will reduce the corporate income tax. Bush said that. Read my lips. No new taxes. Trump said that. A few years ago, he brought down taxes and the economy zoomed up. Tinamaan lang siya ngayon ng COVID. And so, Mr. President, we really have to maintain some form of mental and economic equilibrium in our hearts and in our minds to be able to compete. I'm just emoting here and saying, this is what I see going on. We are at the point in our history where what we do here will echo for eternity, Mr. President. Because if we do this, this Senate will be credited with letting the world set aside. So the golden age of economic boom will also be participated in by the Philippines. Hindi lang yung ibang bansa, hindi lang yung Korea, hindi lang yung... My God, a few years ago, 20 years ago, hirap na hirap ang China, Mr. President. Now, they're now competing with the United States. People even say that they have overtaken the United States. And where are we? We are spectators. We are watchers. We are outsiders. We never became a lover. That song, remember, I'm sure Senator Soto remembers that. Outsider, I used to be your love, but now I am your used to be. We have never graduated from being used to be. Used to be in our economy, used to be in the second largest, I think we were the second in English-speaking language. We were number one in Southeast Asia. We used to be the investment darling. We used to call ourselves the Pearl of the Orient. My God, Mr. President, what happened to us? And right now we're at the crossroads of our history. Tarry a little, I will always say. There is much to be learned and much to do. And to my mind, if we drop the ball here again, nako, Mr. President, I always have a standard. When I go to the bathroom to take a look and brush my teeth or shave, I say, are you doing right by your country? Are you doing that right by your title? Or are you just using the title to become somebody different than the country? The elite, the so-called dons, the padrones, or the señores? Or are you just doing it because you are occupying a seat And that's all you occupy, a seat that will never make a difference in the lives of our people. Mr. President, once more, I appeal. I'm not going to influence you one way or the other. I appeal to us to use our heads this time and look at the long future. Otherwise, we will have a short future, Mr. President. Short future will be back to square one, even backwards, Mr. President. We're a country running in order to stay in place. Wrong, Mr. President. We're no longer running to stay in place. We are running, and yet we're falling back. This is the day. This is the hour by which we must make the decision. And Mr. President, I rest my case here, Mr. President. I think it's important that we get the baselines. We get the vision organized, Mr. President. Because if we don't get the vision right, talangin niyo sila, yung mga Villar, you know, Manny Villar, all these people, si Cynthia, they were all working. Maraming naiingit sa kanila, maraming nagsasabi, may mga connection niya. Pero, you can't go on. My father used to tell me when I advise you in business, if you're so darn smart, why ain't you rich? And my father made us well off, Mr. President. My mother made us well off. Wow. To creative, honest, hard work. And that is what counts here today, Mr. President. Not our words, but our vision, our values, our capability to say, I'm going to step in the plate and compete, really compete, not just watch as the camel train goes by, as the doors bark. We're still here where we are, in the dark, without being able to give a future for the generations of this country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Cayetano.
Mr. President, I want to make a manifestation.
Senator Villar is recognized.
Yeah. I just want to tell you that Manny and I started in when we were 25 years old. Our first business is a gravel and sand business with 2 trucks. And we went to real estate because we were delivering gravel and sand to real estate companies like BF Homes and Manuela. So Manny thought that he could build houses. So he started really from scratch. And we grew not because of our influence, but really it's hard work and perseverance. So we never think that we can grow rich because of our influence in government. We went to government because my father was a mayor for 22 years, and and he gave the mayorship to my brother. And he became a congressman and he gave the congressional seat to Manny. Parang pinamana sa amin na we cannot resist or we cannot say no. But we never really use our political influence to make our company. We are used to fighting it out in the free market. So yun lang ang gusto ko sabihin, na hindi ito product of government influence. It's really hard work and perseverance. So kaya yun lang po, gusto ko lang i-manifest yun kasi baka akala ng mga tao yumaman si Manny dahil sa political influence. Wala naman po siyang masyado nga mahiyain to gain political favors. Mahiyain nga siya, hindi siya mahilig sa ganun. Okay, thank you very much.
Repose, Mr. President, I think I was not referring to the Villars as like that. I was saying they did it by creative, honest work with vision and with the value of hard work. And if they're rich, kayo maingit, sabihin nyo, kagayahin ko yan. Work hard. Kami baliktad My parents were not rich, Mr. President, but they worked hard after the war. And we became wealthy. I used to have my mother collect the money from our restaurants and put it under her bed every day. And where did we start getting poorer? When we entered politics.
Yeah.
That's the whole problem, Mr. President. We got caught because my father was assassinated. And when my father got assassinated, my mother had to run for office na pabayaan yung negosyo. And kami rin, we had to work harder now because of that. Simply that, Mr. President. So the lesson here is working hard. Not just talking about your vision, but making sure, like I said, the world steps aside because you will work hard. so that the world will step aside to let anyone pass who knows where he's going. Thank you, Mr. President, and I hope Senator Villar did not take offense because I really meant
No,
it.
no, no. I'm just explaining how we started. So it's really a small business going to big business, and our we became big because we went public. We went abroad and raised money from abroad in 1995 because of our IPO. That's what made us big. Kung yung earnings lang namin sa Philippines, hindi kami lalaki. Kasi pag naka-IPO ka sa abroad, they will bring money to you as investment to your company. Money raised during that time, 1995, $220 million. And then in 2007, he raised another $520 million. Just with that, our company became big. It's not money from the Philippines. If we're going to save what we earned here, we will not grow big. We will become a medium-sized company. It's the IPO abroad which gave us the capital to become big.
Yeah, I mean,
So
that's
it's really investment from abroad.
My
Ito
esteemed
IPA.
colleagues, let us go back to the issue at hand. The Senate Bill 1357. And may we know the pleasure of the body, Mr. Majority Leader? Do you still want to decide on whether we should split this or not? Because as I said earlier, in my opinion, if we choose a good option, there is no need to split. But if the body wants to split, then so be it. So before we are able to proceed, perhaps let's find out from our colleagues if you want to decide it now. Shall we split the bill or not?
Mr. President,
Minority Leader.
uh, my thinking, Mr. President, is that we were presented by the Senate President pro tempore with options. We bring this home, we study it, we come back Monday or Tuesday in caucus, and then decide which option or option 1, 2, or 3 with amendments, and then let the majority decide on that. And once we have decided on a proposal, then we proceed with the amendments of starting with Title 13, which will be easy if we come up with which option we will follow or a combination of options. But the point is, the majority should decide which option so that we can proceed. Otherwise, sir, we cannot proceed with this. All of us, because of the pandemic, lahat naman tayo nandito lang sa Maynila. So ano ba yung magpatawag Senate President natin ng caucus? Let's continue to discuss. And once we have agreed, madali na yan. That's my suggestion. That's submitting to you, Mr. President.
Yes, we can do that. As a matter of fact, I was thinking that with the options presented by the President pro tem, we would be able to facilitate the proceedings, no?
Yes.
But then again, the beachhead always is that issue of splitting comes up every now and then. And you know very well, the minority leader knows very well that, and I've told the sponsor that we discussed last week, the possibility of not taking it up anymore and leave it to the problem, rib the problem to the palace or the Supreme Court, whoever wants to take it there, so that we can facilitate our proceedings. And then, I was thinking that, well, perhaps we get it out of the way. If any of our colleagues would like to really insist on discussing the splitting or not, and let's get it out of the way. Otherwise,
I would
there's nothing. We're studying something that. But I do agree with you. We can study, give a few days, and then call for a caucus, and all senators caucus, and WebEx perhaps on WebEx or Cisco, and then we can easily finish the period of amendments when we come back on November 9.
Yes.
I have a more pressing problem right now because I'm told by somebody from the House that they're only submitting November 5. That's the same thing. That's the same proposal of Senator Cayetano, Speaker Cayetano. If that's the case, they will still be delayed. So I think we should, any of us who would be able to get in touch with the leadership in the House, tell them that we need it before October 30, or at least next week. They can print it. If they pass it tomorrow, they can print it within 7 days.
Mr. President,
Oh, yes,
No.
Senator
now
Lacson.
brought it up, I cannot understand if they will pass on third reading tomorrow. I cannot understand why they would transmit the GAB to us on November 5 unless may plano na naman silang mag-amend after the third reading.
Yes,
If we plan
yes, yes, Senator Ping.
change,
Exactly what they will do. They will pass it on third reading on record, and then in the process of printing, they will accept amendments from their individual members. So that is why they cannot present a copy, a printed copy on third reading when they vote on it, because they will amend. That's their practice. So that is what will happen. That is why they will be able to submit only the printed copy on November 5, because between approval on third reading and November 5, they will do the amendments.
that's what I'm saying. So nothing much has changed from previous
Yes.
leadership team. It's all the same.
Mr. President.
Well, I wish Senator Bongo is listening so that this issue will reach the palace.
Mr. President, just a short
President.
a reminder, if I may.
President.
I hope you'll
On the same point, Mr. President.
Chairman of Finance, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm glad you brought that out, and our senior members have said that it's not enough time because pag November 5 or November 6 po makarating dito sa Senado, I was told the staff will need at least a week to study, I think, and even the vice chairs would need time to study it. So if perhaps we can request the leadership to discuss, or the majority leader to discuss with his counterpart, that to agree to give it at an earlier date, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. President. I agree because kung November 5 or 6, give or take another 14 days, 1 week for the subcommittee chairs, and another week for LBRM to consolidate, and 1 day to file, another day to sponsor, that's already December. And we will have our period interpellations and amendments for 2 weeks. So that's already December 16 or 14. So may bycam pa. So I reenacted then.
So Christmas na, boss. Christmas na.
That's unacceptable, Mr. President. If they will pass it on third reading tomorrow, immediately thereafter, they should transmit the budget bill to us.
Mr. President,
Mr. President, can we dispose of this bill? I just, I'm not stopping anyone from discussing that topic, but we are still, as the presiding officer pointed out, just let me know. So
Thank you. Because the only reason I brought it up is because I am bothered by the issue of how we can continue with the measure, because the proposal of a split always comes up. So I was thinking that we should dispose it. If you're not ready to discuss it, if you're not ready to discuss, you've been discussing it for hours in the past up to now. If you are not ready to vote on it, then let's suspend the measure and resume on November 9. That is the best thing that we can do. If that's
Mr. President.
the case.
Mr.
I'm raising my hand,
President,
Mr. President.
please go ahead, Mr.
Senator Gordon is
ahead.
recognized.
Again, with all due respect to everyone, Mr. President, I realize that there are things that some people may cause aspersions, and I don't want to be. I think we're bigger people than that, Mr. President. I suggest we just go on and continue to discuss our side of the Congress, Mr. President, and proceed and try to finish this as much as we can. The president, if the other house wants to play games, we're not going to play games. We're going to show the people that we can finish this bill, Mr. President, if that's important enough for us. I realize that there are time mandates that sometimes we're manacled by time. Again, I'm using the word manacle again. But the important thing is let's finish the job And then if they want to delay it, then it's on them, not us. Basta sa atin, ginagawa natin ang trabaho natin. Kung ang laro nila, i-delay para sisisihin tayo. We're not in that game, Mr. President. We're not in the blame-fixing game, Mr. President. We're in the problem-fixing game. And I would like to think that we can continue with this in spite of everything, Mr. President.
All right, but again, yes, that's correct. But the minority leader has asked for a few days to study the options.
That's all right,
And
Mr. President. I repose to that.
I am getting the I'm trying to get the opinion of the sponsor
Mr. President.
at this point. Yeah, majority leader.
Yeah, Mr. President, there's two major items on the line now. I believe it's the one that was raised earlier by the chairperson, which is splitting the measure, and which we have to, as you said, no, we have to get that out of the way so that we can discuss it as a single measure, and then maybe work with the chairperson together with Senator Ralph Recto on an option that is acceptable, I guess, to both the side of Senator Recto and Senator Gordon, as well as the side of the DOF. I think that is something that we can work on. That will take time, though. I don't think we'll be able to do that tonight. So if you want, we can dispose first with the first issue at hand, and then allow the chairperson to work again with Ralph on an option that is acceptable to all sides. If not, because if it is not acceptable to all sides, when we resume in November 9, we will have to decide and vote on which particular proposal we will tackle, whether it is the options of Senator Recto or the create measure, or the create itself, as is, Mr. President. Basically, that's on the table. That's the only thing on the table as of the moment, until we can craft something that options that are in place which are acceptable to all, Mr. President.
All right. The Senate, as we all know, is run by the committees. And therefore, I asked the chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means, the sponsor, to tell us what she favors to do at this point.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. I acknowledge the request of the Senate, the Minority Floor Leader, to study the option given. It is a very fair request, and we'd like to give him time to study that, Mr. President. Meantime, of course, I will also continue to study it, discuss with any of you who would like to discuss it further. So I think that is my recommendation, Mr. President, on that issue. Give time to study. And then on the other issue, Mr. President, on the splitting, perhaps we could resolve that so that we can accomplish and move forward one day at a time, one step at a time. Maybe we could already resolve that. I have extensively discussed this with the Minority Floor Leader. The records will show that. I have put on record the opinions that I got from the various Senate departments, and read into the record the jurisprudence, which is why the Department of Finance stands by that position, and that is the position of this your committee chair, Mr. President. So if we could resolve that, I still would be happy to confer with the body what other issues on this matter need to be tackled. Any clarification I can give, I would be happy to do that if the body is also prepared, Mr. President, so that when we come back, we can move on. Kayo na rin ho naman ang nagsabi na napakaraming, we have only covered a fraction of the provisions that need to be captured. So why don't we settle this one issue, Mr. President? Thank you.
So, Majority Leader,
I just remembered the song.
Willing to take up to give time to to our colleagues, as requested by the Minority Leader, to study the options. But she is ready to discuss, or not discuss. She's ready to dispose of the issue on splitting. We leave it to the Majority Leader. What is your pleasure?
Okay, Mr. President. Okay, Mr. President. Actually, before you called me, I didn't know I was not unmuted. I started singing the song of Carpenters. We've only just begun to live. Okay, Mr. President. Levity aside. Therefore, we move to of course, to be able to entertain the wishes of our dear chairperson, so that she can already move forward and we can already move forward I so move, Mr. President, we divide the House on that particular issue, on splitting the bill into either retaining it as one bill or splitting it into two bills of two different topics, Mr. President. So you decide, Mr. President, what the vote of nay and the yay vote or the a vote, tie votes would be.
Mr. President, inquiry, Mr. President.
Senator Tolentino, it's very nice.
The previous manifestation I made has something to do with the chicken and egg situation. So if we are now voting on the issue of division, that would entail the absorption of one of the three options presented by the good gentleman from Batangas. So in effect, the result, Mr. President, the consequence would be a vote in favor of the retention of the create bill in its entirety would accommodate one of the three options presented by Senator Recto, which we are going to study. Is that the correct appreciation of the vote, Mr. President?
Yes, yes.
One or more, because someone, Mr. President, might offer another option. So one of the three or something else altogether, definitely.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So the motion of the majority leader is to divide the House on whether we should split 1357 into two or not. All right. So if there is no objection, then we call for a vote. All those, we will probably have to go to a nominal vote because you are virtually.
Sino yan?
Mahirap.
Okay.
Mahirap ang sigawan dito. The A's and Nays will not do it. We will have to go.
Okay na.
Raising of hands is enough, or shall we go nominal? The Senate Secretary. Raising of hands? Yung nakalag in, Yung mga hindi nakalag cannot vote. Yung mga walang picture.
Mr. President, can we account first how many are present virtually and physically?
Virtually, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And there are 3 of us here. So we are 14.
We have a quorum.
A winning vote must have 8. Winning vote. The winning motion must have 8 votes. All right. So let us. We'll do the raising of hands.
Can
All
we start?
those in favor of splitting the bill, raise your right hand. Senator Dillon, I will not count your vote. You're raising your left hand, All right. Thank you. All those in favor of not splitting the bill, raise your right hand. Apat lang kanina. 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 in favor. So the bill is not split. 10
Mr.
not in favor. I'm sorry. 10 not in favor, and therefore the bill is not going to be split. Sponsor.
Mr. President, Majority Leader, may I briefly
Senator Ralph.
yes, just to briefly explain my vote, Mr. President. I agree with all the legal points raised by the minority leader on the downside of not splitting the bill. But I promised the sponsor that I will have to join her in not speeding to move it forward, Mr. President. So thank you. I just wanted to put that on record.
All right. So, Madam Sponsor, Senator Pia Cayetano,
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear colleagues.
do you agree with the minority leader that give us a few days to study and we can call for a caucus perhaps next week, like Tuesday?
Yes, I said earlier, Mr. President, I believe that is a very fair and reasonable request. We are happy to give time and also to go into caucus at any point that it is convenient for the majority of the members, Mr. President.
All right. So, Majority Leader, we can suspend the measure.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We can suspend already to November 9, and you want to call for a caucus next week, Mr. President? An all-member caucus. We don't need to.
We'll suspend first the consideration of the measure.
Yes, Mr. President. I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1357 under Committee Report number 50, Mr. President. So moved.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure suspended.
So, Mr. President, do you want to suspend to the date of the caucus, or do you want to suspend November 9, Mr. President, and just call for an all-member caucus through WebEx?
We have
on our
already
first-
informed the House. We have already informed the House officially that we will resume on November 9. So we must suspend the session now until November 9, 3 o'clock in the afternoon of November 9. And the caucus can be done any day, but at the moment we're looking at the possibility of Tuesday morning, perhaps, or Tuesday after lunch, so that we have enough time. There's no need to break for lunch.
Insert into the record an explanation.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. President. With that, Mr. President, before we, Senator Villar would like to be recognized, Mr. President.
Maybe after our caucus, since we will choose in our caucus what model we're going to adopt, then maybe our co-members can write their amendment na, so that it will be easier when we go back to session in November 9 na our sponsor can read the amendments, and maybe he can decide na what she will accept on November 9 or not.
Mr. President, precisely we have those options because the amendment will be governed and will have to follow the option that is agreed upon. If you propose the amendments now and
That's why after we have chosen the option.
after we've chosen the option.
Maybe we can study during the break when we come back, or if you can give it to the sponsor earlier, maybe she can study and she would know what to accept and what not to accept. So it will be easier.
All right. Noted on that. Anyway, we're sure that once we choose the option, everything else will follow and it will be a lot easier. Senator Cayetano,
Yes.
please.
Mr. President, I would like to state our initial thoughts on the option, just so that our colleagues can be guided. Mr. President, the objective of the creation of the FIR, to strengthening and the powers given to FIRB, is really so that they can rationalize and monitor all the IPAs. We've also had a lengthy discussion on this with the minority floor leader, that it is really the objective to cover all IPAs. And therefore, my preference would be somewhere would not be number 1 because of the exclusions of the IPAs. Now, just to be consistent with that desire to include all IPAs, so that all the incentives being granted, they can monitor, they can assess, they will have access to the CBAs, yung cost-benefit analysis. Otherwise, they would not have access to those IPAs. So definitely, medyo mahirap pong tanggapin yung number 1. I would say we're somewhere in 2 and 3. I have not studied the written submission of His Honor, the Senate President Pro Tem, but I am personally more inclined to carve out an industry. His Honor has made a very good case on the importance of exports in the country, and a lot of these IPAs, if not all, have export industries. Therefore, if we say that we will, when I say carve out, what I mean is give them some kind of preferential treatment, they would still be under FIRB. All the IPAs would still be under the FIRB, but perhaps we
with-
can,
But with the preferential treatment.
yes, with the preferential treatment for the export businesses,
Yes.
which His Honor, the Senate President Pro Temp, has very clearly explained to me is differently situated than those who just want to sell to our market. Kumikita sila by selling to us. So I have an open mind to that, Mr. President. So
Yes.
that's more or less captured in option 2, but it still has to be within the FIRB. So I have to just study it a little bit more clearly. But for the benefit of our colleagues, itong sponsor nyo po, medyo dun ho mas komportable. At yun ho
Mr.
ang
President.
palagi ko madedepensahan ko sa DOF.
Mr. President, Mr. President,
Senator Tolentino.
can we consider now, Mr. President, the comments coming from the food sponsor as option number 4?
Well, it is it is a fusion of option number 2 and some points. So we could not really call it option number 4.
Maybe it's an amended 2 already
Amended two,
as
yeah,
it is.
amended
Because
two.
I think under 2, there is a desire to take out exports from the FIRB. Hindi naman po yun ang position natin. Ang gusto natin, we will give you preferential treatment, but you still report. Yung mga reportorial requirements ng FIRB nandun pa rin. Offhand, dun ho ang position ko.
All right. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that, I move to suspend our sessions till November 9. My apologies. There's a manifestation, I was told by my staff, by Senator Recto, but I think he already said it. My staff's reminded me that the explanation of his vote will be submitted
Yes. very
to
good.
the Secretariat. So I'm sorry, Mr. President. So I may continue, if I may continue. I move to suspend session until November 9, 2020 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Mr. President.
We
I
have
so move.
already informed the House of the amended calendar of the Senate. Any objection? Hearing none, the session is suspended until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of November 9, 2020.